Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the commission. Remonstrators will also have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition, other than the petitioner, will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the commission during the question and answer phase of the commission's deliberations. And I would like to remind everybody, we've got one particular agenda item that has been heard more than once, and we've had a little problem with people speaking out of turn. Please understand that you will all have an opportunity to be heard, and we ask that you please respect the proceedings. Subdivision plat and development plan petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing, even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We understand there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can do a roll call, please.
Greg Zuzan.
Present.
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Catherine Ransberg.
Present.
Dave Kaufman.
Here.
Bill Reed. Here. Andrew Rockebrand.
Present.
Jennifer Spencer. Jennifer Spencer is absent.
We do have a quorum. I would let every petitioner who's here have the opportunity to decide whether or not they want to request a continuance due to the lack of a full panel. We do have a quorum. However, you do have the opportunity or the option of requesting a continuance because we do not have everybody here tonight. That request may or may not be granted depending on the arguments, but I do want to make you aware of that option. Moving on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Any suggested changes, edits, questions? If not, we'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from the February 24th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting.
Have a second?
Second.
Having had a motion and a second, will not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say nay. Meeting minutes are approved. We're now moving on to the public comment section of portion of the meeting. This is an opportunity for those of you who are present to speak to anything that is not already on the agenda tonight. If it's on the agenda, then you can speak to it at that time. But if there's something else you'd like to raise, now's the opportunity to come forward and have your voice heard. Is there anybody who'd like to speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda? Very good. Then the public comment portion of our meeting is now closed. Moving on to the request for continuances or agenda modifications. Linda, do we have any requests for or any continuances or modifications happening? So we are hearing the full agenda tonight. Moving on now, here we go. Old business, Whispering Pines South.
Thank you, President Ransberg, members of the commission. So I know some of you were here and heard this in January. Maybe a couple of you weren't. And then most of you heard it again in February, but not necessarily all of you. So we'll be doing a full presentation to make sure everybody has all of the information. And as we've done in the past, there are two separate petitions here, ZA 2411, which is a zoning map amendment request, as well as WC 2401, which is a separate petition, which you will vote on separately to potentially modify commitments from a previous case. But we think it makes sense to hear both of those together, where we plan to do our presentation for those two cases together. And it would probably make sense with the amount of people here to comment to allow the same amount of time that you would allow for two petitions just combined into one presentation.
We had that come up at the last meeting. I think it would be appropriate for us to extend the amount of time for the petitioner as well as the remonstrators. Does anybody have any objection to that? The normal amount of time is 10 minutes. I suggest 20 minutes. Does that sound appropriate for each side? Okay, very good.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. So ZA 2411 and WC 2401 for Whispering Pines South are requests for a zoning map amendment and modification of written commitments. Property is located at 1520 South County Road, 625 East, just southwest of the intersection of 625 East and 150 South. What is proposed for rezoning is just a little over 32 acres. You'll hear me talk about the south 40 acres as it pertains to the existing commitments. I think we talked a little bit about this before, but again, not skipping over anything. What was originally the south 40 acres has been reduced by part of the Whispering Pines development, encroaching into that south 40 acres with their amenity area. Another 1 acre piece was apparently sold off to the Vapors, who own the property to the west. And there's another 1.5 acres that's part of the Whispering Pines Boulevard right-of-way, which is not in the legal description that the petitioner submitted, but it, for all practical purposes, is part of what would be considered this Whispering Pines South. So it's currently zoned R1. This was continued originally from December so it could be discussed at town council. And then you had a full hearing in January and it was continued at the request of the petitioner, as is their right. And you had another full hearing last month and you chose to continue this to allow additional time for all parties to review the latest revisions, because some of those came in fairly close to the hearing and weren't able to be fully incorporated into the staff report that you received in February. So the property is unimproved. It was rezoned back in 2003 while it was under the jurisdiction of the county. It was zoned to the county's RB district, along with the 80 acres to the north and northwest, which subsequently was developed as the current Whispering Pines subdivision. There were written commitments back in 2003 that applied to all of the property. Some applied exclusively to the north 80 acres and some applied exclusively to the south 40 acres. the South 40 acres, the commitments were a little more restrictive on the allowed number of lots, the minimum lot width, lot size, et cetera, as it was intended to provide a little bit of a transition from north to south, where the lots are and the lot widths and lot sizes are a little smaller to the north and they're larger to the south. The property was annexed into the town of Avon in 2005 and 2006. And as I mentioned, the north 80 acres has been developed as Whispering Pines. That was platted in 4 sections roughly 20 years ago. The south 40 acres that we're talking about today was not developed. It was sold to the Avon Community School Corporation in 2009. I can't speak directly to their motivations, but my understanding is they had reserved the site for an elementary school, which they now believe isn't necessary. So they're looking to sell the property. And so that brings us to where we are today, with the petitioner seeking a favorable recommendation on a zoning map amendment from R1 to R2, and then a favorable recommendation on modification of written commitments to terminate some conditions and modify others in order to allow for originally a greater number of lots. They've actually revised the request, so now they're not requesting a greater number of lots, but they are still requesting some reduction in the minimum lot width and lot size, as well as a minor change in the side yard setback, but that's really almost imperceptible. But I'll talk more about that as we go through this. So just take a look. That's the property there. And again, just in case you're not familiar, this is Whispering Pines to the north. This is the subject site here. You have Timber Bend to the south, Bridgewater, which is still unincorporated in the county jurisdiction, to the east. And then you have this property that is owned by the Vapor family to the west. So this is a look at the potential proposed site layout that the petitioner had back in January, where they would have developed 71 lots here. This is what they submitted prior to the February hearing. Nothing has changed between then and now. This would have 64 lots, and it would have, So in either case, there was going to be an additional retention pond, but there were more lots that would have came up here under the previous submittal. So that's just an exhibit showing essentially the typical lot size up here in Whispering Pines, which you can kind of see just eyeballing it. These are a little bit small, a little bit more narrow lots. These are larger, wider lots to the south. This is a typical lot size for Whispering Pines, 85 feet wide, 150 feet deep. This is a typical lot size in Whispering Pine, or I'm sorry, in Timber Bend, 125 feet wide, 175 feet deep. So fairly significant difference there. So this shows you again, existing Whispering Pines up here to the north. What was originally proposed for the South 40 acres back in 2003. So there would have been 64 lots under this layout. This is showing you what was proposed in 2003 when this was rezoned under the county versus what's proposed today. Again, still 64 lots, but as you can kind of see, the lots extended more up into the northwestern portion of the South 40 acres, whereas now they're restricted, so they're kind of all pushed down to the southeast just a little bit. Part of that, if you kind of look at where the existing pond is for Whispering Pines, it's basically right in this area. It would have been right on the edge of where these lots were originally proposed. The clubhouse that you can see here in the pool, those are located right here. So that now would restrict where these lots could go a little bit. And then the addition of the second pond that's proposed now, that's kind of in this area. So that all results in if there's going to be 64 lots here, they're going to not be able to meet the minimum lot width and lot size that were committed to back in 2003, hence the request to modify commitments. And just kind of visualizing the numbers. So where in this area here, back in 2003 compared to today, there's 8 less houses, basically because of this space being not available now. Where they've made that up is they've added 1 house here as compared to what was here. They've added 2 houses along 625 compared to what was shown there. And then they've added 1 house along the south border compared to what was shown on the original 2003 plan. So you have this in I think you have all these exhibits in your staff report packet that you received. But again, so the property is currently zoned R1, which has a minimum 90-foot lot width and a minimum 15,000 square foot lot size and a 7-foot side yard setback. They're proposing to rezone to R2, which allows as low as an 80-foot lot width and 12,500 square foot lot size. Side yard setback would remain the same at 7 feet. So here we're looking at what's existing in Whispering Pines and then in Timber Bend, and what they would be required to do under the existing commitments. So you see you have this nice transition from 85-foot minimum lot width and 12,500 square foot lot size in Whispering Pines. And then this is what would be permitted within this south 40 acres, what we're calling Whispering Pines South. And this is what, except for along the south boundary, right adjacent to Timber Bend, this is what's currently required from the 2003 commitments. And then this is what's typical in Timber Bend. So comparing that to what's now proposed with this request to modify commitments, the interior lots in this proposed Whispering Pines South would be minimum 85 feet wide and 12,750 square feet, which would be basically matching Whispering Pines lot size, just, barely a little bit larger. Would note that there'd be a 10-foot side yard setback, which would be a little higher than what's required in Whispering Pines, although most of Whispering Pines homes, from what I could see, had a larger side yard setback, although some were near this 7 feet, but most of them were a bit greater setback. And then along the south line, they would propose a 110-foot minimum lot width and 16,500 square foot lot size with a 15-foot side yard setback. And so you can see the lot sizes would go from 85, 110 to 125. Lot sizes, it's a lot width. Lot size from 12.5, 12,750, 16.5, 20,000. And then side yard setback requirement from 7 to 10 to 15 to 15, I believe was required in Timber Bend, but 20 feet or more is actually typical with the larger lots down there. So there's still a transition from Whispering Pines to the north to Timber Bend to the south. It's just not quite the same transition as what's existing. So with rezoning from R1 to R2, as you're aware, you have 5 criteria that need to be met. You need to pay reasonable regard to all of them, but you don't need to find that all are met. You need to look at it as a totality of the circumstances and evidence in making your decision. So the first criteria being the comprehensive plan, the second being the current condition and character of structures in the district, the third being the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted, the fourth being conservation of property values, and the fifth being responsible development and growth. I'm going to, just to make sure we're all clear on how we got, especially as staff with a recommendation from January to today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we said in January. In January, we pointed out that the future land use cluster map doesn't provide a specific recommendation for this site. So when there's no specific recommendation on the map, typically, unless there's a nearby recommendation that it would make sense to extend, we presume that the comprehensive plan, that it supports the underlying zoning that's already in effect, which in this case is R1. So we said the best interpretation of the comp plan is that it supports the R1 zoning. We said that the existing R1 zoning and commitments provides for a logical transition from the smaller lots to the north to the larger lots to the south. And given the surroundings, we said single-family residential is the most desired use, which is your third criteria. We said the conservation of property values would best be accomplished by transitioning lot sizes from north to south as currently required by R1 zoning and the commitments. And that platting the site to the current zoning and commitments would appear to be the most responsible way to develop the property. We said we didn't object to modifying commitments related to architectural styles and house designs, but we didn't see a reason to reduce lot sizes, lot widths, and side setbacks that were agreed to back in 2003. Also should note that in January, the request was to increase the minimum number of lots permitted from 64 to 71. So at that time, we saw that the petitioner appeared to be trying to squeeze more onto the site by going to 71 lots instead of 64 than what was agreed to in 2003. And so we found that it made sense to recommend an unfavorable recommendation on both the rezoning and the written commitments. So again, just showing you the 5 criteria and looking at where we were when we met in February and where we are still today, because nothing from our standpoint has changed from last month to this month. So the couple key things from staff's perspective is that the request to increase the allowed number of lots from 64 to 71 has been withdrawn. So 64 lots on 32.16 acres would result in a gross density of 1.99 units per acre. This would be very close, much closer to the 1.8 units per acre max that's allowed in R1. It wouldn't be close to the maximum 3 units allowed in R2. So in other words, with the commitments, one could say that, this is an R2 light, if you will. What's going to be developed is still going to be closer to the R1 minimum standards than what's allowed in R2. And while, again, we said the best interpretation of the comp plan is that it supports the existing R1 zoning of the site, we acknowledge that with the revised proposed commitments, it would still come closer to meeting the R1 standards. And when we look at the properties along the south line that directly abut Timber Bend, those lots with 110-foot minimum lot width and a 16,500 square foot lot size, those exceed the standards for R1. So we think the requested rezoning to R2 represents a much less significant change because of the existing and proposed modified commitments. And although R1 with the existing commitments provides for the smoothest transition from the smaller lots to the north to the larger lots to the south, the increases that they've made in their proposal from 80 feet to 85 feet for the rest of the lots to going to 110 feet along the south line, the increased square footage for the lot sizes, and most importantly, reducing the request from 71 lots back down to the 64 that are currently permitted, that also makes sense and can provide a decent transition between the two existing neighborhoods, north and south. We still believe detached single family is the most desirable use for the land. And we don't believe that this development would negatively impact property values and that it would be a responsible growth and development. So while it might be ideal if the property could be developed according to the 2003 commitments, we would also point out that the South 40 acres, as I mentioned in the beginning, has been reduced by the fact that part of the existing Whispering Pines amenity area and detention pond is in that South 40 acres. There's apparently a need and a benefit to providing a second retention pond there. And so you're still looking at the same number of houses on the same overall 40 acres because that other area isn't going to be developed with more houses. So we look at the effect as being pretty similar to what was intended in 2003. Again, with regard to certain modifications to architectural styles and house designs, staff doesn't usually weigh in on that kind of thing. That's something that's usually negotiated between petitioners and neighbors or neighborhood groups. We would point out that anything that's built here will be required to meet the minimum architectural standards of the UDO as amended, which actually will apply what used to be the enhanced architectural standards prior to September of last year. Those standards now apply to all subdivisions, and that would apply to this subdivision. So for all those reasons, we are now recommending the forwarding of favorable recommendations for both ZA 2411 and WC 2401. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So maybe a couple of questions here. If you could go back maybe 2 slides, that one. Here you talk about the south 40 acres. The size has been decreased because of the decision to put the amenity center, I believe, is in there, and now the need for another retention pond. So if nothing was done, the developer could develop that to the current standards, the current commitments of R1, it'd just be fewer lots because they'd have to be larger lots than what we're looking at right now. It's being proposed.
Yes, that sounds correct.
So the developer made a decision to put the amenity center in the south 40 acres, reducing the size that it originally was, and what we're looking at a smaller development area.
Yeah, let me go back to a map here. Maybe this one. So yeah, the original developer put the amenity area here a little bit further south than what was originally planned. And then also you can see this is a straight line over here. I'm not sure if there was already a plan to sell this off. This piece here was sold off. I don't know if it was going to be a common area at that time, but yeah, that affects it a little bit as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and just my point I'm trying to make sure I understand is that there's an area to be developed according to current standards for R1. It's been reduced since you said 2003. So getting 64 houses, which were planned, is now getting 64 houses in a smaller piece of property. So the lot sizes are what we're seeing, smaller lots to larger lots to Timber Bend here. So it's approved to be developed. That was a plan to have single family homes, but with any development here, things change, new requirements, or finding that retention ponds have to be put in to protect the water flow. So I'm just trying to make sure getting all the facts of why going from R1 to R2. And then in the staff report from January on criterion 5, the statement was made, staff believes that the existing R1 zoning as further restricted by the existing commitments would result in the most responsible development possible. So I'm not sure I heard anything that other than that because of the commitments we're getting closer, what the difference is between January and now. Is it really really indifferent?
Well, I would point to the staff report in January. For criterion 5, we did say that while development under R2 zoning as proposed by the petitioner might not constitute irresponsible growth, which another way of saying that would be you might find that it would be responsible. We just thought it would be the most appropriate, most responsible to try to meet the current commitments. We think that what the petitioner has shown in reducing, in basically withdrawing the request to increase the number of lots, and coming pretty close to meeting those existing commitments, and then factoring in that there are other things that have been developed that take away a little bit of the space where, as you can see here, they could have had lots up here and now they can't. We think that having 64 lots on this piece of land is still going to have a similar impact on the community. And so we don't think it's inappropriate to make some minor modification to those commitments in order to be able to develop 64 lots.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question also. Staff report says that you recommend denial, and now you're saying that you recommend approval.
Are you referring to the ZA 2411 specifically, or because we have two separate reports?
I'm looking,
Make sure I'm looking at the right
I'm
one.
looking at the zoning, yes, the ZA 2411.
So in
Could you
writing,
just talk about that a little bit?
yeah, so in writing the report originally in January, we were recommending denial or unfavorable recommendation to town council. So in looking at that report, if you're looking at section J, everything from that point on, those are the staff comments from January. So if you're seeing that we recommend denial under letter L on page 7, that's all the original report, and we don't want to actually change the report. We want to keep what we said in January, so that's still on the record. But under section I, which is additional comments for February 24th, at that point, we said that we were still recommending an unfavorable recommendation, but new information had come in and we would provide comments at the hearing. And I believe Linda indicated that we were supportive last month. But then going up to section H, which is additional comments for March 24th, that's where the staff then, at the bottom of page 2, says, for the reasons noted above, we now recommend the forwarding of a favorable recommendation based on the changes that were made after January.
You can understand why this is confusing though, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to write a new report and disregard the old report and not have that information included, so that it's clear to everyone, here's what we said in January and here's what we're saying now, so that we have to substantiate why we're changing our recommendation, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm just thinking there might be a better format for doing this as opposed to having the change in recommendation piecemealed into the report itself, perhaps having an addendum to the report so that you still have the intact report from January, but then we're able to and the public is able to very clearly see and understand that the recommendation has changed.
We can certainly take that under consideration.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions for staff?
The way it's presented now, does it meet the open space requirement as well?
It does.
And is most of that open space in the detention pond up there? Because there's no amenities within the development itself.
Correct. There's open space that would be counted along the south property line, that common area, as well as along 625. And then there's an open space, that green lot technically would be a common area as well. I think there's a drainage, some piece of drainage infrastructure there, but yeah, the majority of it would be here. The minimum open space requirement is 8%. I don't have the exact number in front of me. The petitioner may have that, but we did calculate that and noted that it was significantly above the 8%, is my recollection.
Thank you.
And I just want to refer to WC 2401. We have the same thing going on in terms of original was a denial,
Mhm.
It has since been changed, but it's piecemealed in the report as opposed to being a separate document that we can understand. I'm just, so the public understands what's going on here.
Noted.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Okay, we'll have the petitioner come forward.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Avon Plan Commission. For the record, David Compton, Vice President, Land Acquisition. Thanks, Paul. Pulte Homes of Indiana, 11595 North Meridian Street, Carmel, Indiana. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And Paul, thank you for your in-depth report. Hopefully I can provide some additional clarification to the Plan Commission on some of the questions that Paul and other members have brought forth. I'm going to try to start on the presentation. Oops. There we go. Okay, we're all familiar with the location. This was actually the last phase of the Whispering Pines development. We originally went through the zoning, as we've discussed, through the county in 2003. We all know about the Great Housing Depression. Estridge was supposed to be the builder in the entire project. Not just the north end, but the entire project was going to be Estridge Homes. So unfortunately, the developer went bankrupt, the economy slowed down, and then the school system stepped in and bought it from the bank through Mr. Scolaire, who was the original developer. But Estridge was originally going to build this last section as part of the continuation of the community. Larger lots with some additional architectural standards. This is the most current plan. This is the updated one we've been talking about. And as Paul pointed out, I think one of the reasons we received a negative recommendation from staff, and one of the big changes that was made from January, was going from 71 to 64 lots. As we've discussed, the acreage went down, but also there were some land planning decisions made. Greg Zuzan asked about the open space. Actually, there's a provision in the agreement of the transfer of the land to the Whispering Pines Homeowners Associations. There doesn't have to be two lakes here. This was a decision by the development team to try to provide a higher quality open space, better water quality, but we could actually go in and expand the existing lake and pick up a lot of the green space that's left, because at 8% of 32 acres is 2.56 acres of open space. We actually have 5.56 acres of open space. So we made a conscious decision after meeting with Drew and Chad and some of the folks within the homeowners association that this is a really nice kind of wooded area that we could cluster the lots a little bit, still match them up at 85 feet wide with the lots to the north, still be respectful to our timber bend neighbors to the south, but create a much more, I think, a better project, frankly, by not just having one pond. We could have two. We'll treat the water twice, Paul. It'll go into that first pond, and it gets treated a second time when it goes into the other pond, and then it goes out into the vapor property. So think of it as an additional check and savings as far as particulate in the water to settle down. We're able to save more trees. So this was actually a land planning decision, not a requirement by the town. We could meet the town's requirements and the county's requirements for drainage outfall by just expanding the additional ponds, but it would be very invasive on the existing Whispering Pines Amenity Center and the trees that have grown up in there. We've added the south entrance that was always discussed as part of the original zoning. If you go back and look at the original plan, there was an entrance tying in to Bridgewater across the street, directly across from that. And obviously, one of the other things we did is we put the tree preservation in common areas. Behind the south property line, the lots used to go all the way down. We find that when we put trees in tree preservation areas, Dan, people are less likely to come in and cut them down, right? Because they're not on your lot anymore. They're not going to do that. So those lots are still 150 feet wide. They're 110 feet wide, 150 feet deep, sorry, and 110 foot wide. But you can see that green strip at the bottom. We put all those trees in tree preservation. And additionally, what we did was we advised the timber bend neighbors that the homeowners association in the future, if there's a tree that dies, it would be replaced by the homeowners association. We don't have to rely on the individual homeowner to replace that tree. Additionally, out along 625, we put that in tree preservation area also. We continued with the commitment. I think it was a great idea back in 2003. They actually required a chairback curb along 625, so we'll put that in, Paul. That'll keep cars from running off and into the trees as easily when you put a chairback curb in. You traditionally have those easy roll curbs. It's easy to get on those. You hit a chairback curb with your tire, you're going to know it. So again, that keeps cars out of the trees, along 625. Okay, so some of the enhancements over the development scheme. One thing to remember, in 2024, you just updated your own UDO here in Avon. R1 is now 90 feet wide. We're 110 on our south property line. 90 versus 110. So if we were going to bring everything current, we would have brought those down to 90 feet to meet R1, to meet your new standards that were just passed in the updated UDO. But with Paul's input and the people behind me, we kept them. We went from 120 just down to 110. So they're very close in size to what would be the legacy R1 standards. Same with R2. R2 now is 80 feet wide. The rest of Whispering Pines has a minimum square footage of 85 feet wide. We went to the 85 feet wide. So if we wanted to keep that tree preservation, the 2 ponds in that area, not exceed the 64 lots, which we heard loud and clear in January that don't exceed 64. We were able to sell 85 feet, 110 feet, do 2 ponds instead of 1, save a bunch of trees up in that area and create a better quality environment for the community. So the other thing that we added that wasn't mentioned in the staff report by Paul, but I'm going to help out a little bit here, Paul, was the square footage increased. The number one way to raise value of a house is not make the lots bigger, it's to raise the minimum square footage. Make the developer, apologize, probably the kids wanting money, sorry, is to raise the minimum square footage of the houses. So we've got a situation here where we went, the original ranch square footage was 1,900 and 2,300 1,900 square feet. We've gone up to 2,300 square feet. For the 2-story homes, the original square footage minimum was 2,200 square feet. We've gone up to 2,800 square feet. So when you want to add cost and value to houses, the number one way to do it is make the builder build bigger homes. A secondary access point we've talked about more open space. I think we've really improved the drainage system. Lance Farrell is here. Lance is old enough, he worked on the original Whispering Pines. He didn't have gray hair, but he worked on it back then. We've also added a minimum brick requirement on the front of all homes, not just the lots on the southern and eastern perimeter. We've also added staggered setbacks from 25 to 29 feet. That's going to give a better feel in the community, the way the houses, less of a gun barrel effect. And then, of course, we agreed to full dark sky to make sure for light pollution, be respectful to the vapors that are right behind me. And then we did add a right to farm commitment. I think, Mr. Vapor, we talked about that. It's going to be in the HOA docs. And then we've also added a privacy fence and I think some additional trees along your side too we talked about doing to try to be good neighbors with the vapors. So those are some enhancements. You say, well, what changed on the commitments? I think the number one is the additional square footage. Okay, so Paul, kind of what really changed from 03? Square footage is up. I think we've got a higher quality common area. We're more respectful to tree preservation, yet at the same time, we have a good transition, 85 to 85 to 110 to 120. Here's a little comparison we did internally on what's the added value of 10 feet of extra lot width versus 600 square feet in a home. You can see one costs about $8,000. Adding 600 square feet to a home adds about $80,000 in cost to the value of a house. One of the final things is This was originally supposed to be part of the Whispering Pines development. The first 4 sections were developed. We've met with the Timber Bend people a couple different times. We've had probably 3 or 4 meetings with the Whispering Pines because we share an entranceway there. And I committed to them the first time we met that I would be a good neighbor no matter how this worked out, whether we were part of the amenity area or not. Now, the way when you go back and look at that layout, when you come right in, you run into the amenities area. So I think, Greg, it would be pretty darn confusing for us not to be part of that. So we worked hard with the board and the neighbors that showed up at multiple meetings that we had, and we came to this agreement to share amenities, okay? We're not getting it for free. We're committing $300,000. $50,000 comes right away, Paul. Right when we open our model, they'll have that if they want to update the parking lot and repave it. Anything that's deferred maintenance on the pool or clubhouse, that gives them a shot of money to start with. And then as we add volume to that homeowners association, users on the swing set, the playground, and possibly the pool, we're going to pay just under $4,000 a lot every time we close a house. We've additionally agreed to work in good faith with the board to try to end up with one homeowners association, not a regular one in the south. Now, this is a little more complicated because their homeowners association documents are 20 years old. There's been a lot of evolutions there. There's actually been state laws passed since then. So we're gonna take the expense of drafting the first round of documents to try to see if we can effectuate a merger. But if not, we're still gonna cost share on the main entranceway. We're gonna cost share on being part of the pool and amenities area. So glad we were able to work something out. When you buy a house in Whispering Pines existing, Madam Chairman, and you buy in our section, you don't have to explain, oh, you can't use the pool or the amenities because we're going to have pay our agreed upon contribution to be able to do that. And we're also, I think, going to provide at $300,000 a nice upgrade to some of the things that the existing Whispering Pines folks may want to enhance within their amenity area. So some illustrative elevations. The smallest house is the ranch on the right. It's 2,300 square feet. The others are different elevations. I think the biggest thing I could say, and I have to agree with Paul on this, is over the last 20 years, elevations have really been modernized by looking back. You can see we've got a lot more roof lines than we used to do within communities, a lot more architectural features on the front of each of the homes. So those are some illustrative elevations. In closing, I want to look to the south because we've got a lot of our friends from Timber Bend behind me here. This is the dead of winter looking across to the south. The item on the right, item 2, is standing probably at the front of the lot looking back there. And I think it's important. My team reminded me of this. The lots are 150 feet deep. Then there's that tree preservation easement. Then there's the Vapors driveway. Then there's the back of the lots. So this isn't where our lots directly back up to the Timber Pines folks. There's common area trees which will be preserved. And as you remember, I indicated that we would agree to replace anything that died in the future as an HOA and maintain that tree line. So you didn't have to rely on individuals. And then there's the Vapor driveway that runs behind that. Then you get to the individual houses. So appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, provide your presentation. I got plenty of yellow paper, ma'am, to take notes and answer any questions you have in the future. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's get started. There may be a few people who wish to have something to say tonight. I would remind everyone, even though we do have an extended amount of time for remonstration, if you have a comment that has already been mentioned, you might want to allow someone else that has a different comment to speak so that we get a wide variety of input from everybody as opposed to hearing 80% of it saying the same thing and some people not being heard at all. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes each, and my Vice President will be keeping track of that. And who do we have first that is signed up to speak?
Are you wanting people that are in support or remonstrators first?
Well, let's start with, is there anybody here who would like to speak in support of this petition?
We have 2 signed up.
Okay, then let's go ahead and have those
Robin
people speak
Ford.
first. What was the name?
Robin Ford.
Okay, Mr. Ford.
Can I make a request? In January and February,
What is your name, sir?
Chad Furman.
You can speak when the time comes for you to speak. Right now, we're asking for Robin Ford, who signed up to speak. Is Mr. Ford here?
No, it's Mrs. Ford. She's not going to speak. I'll speak.
Or Mrs. Ford? Are you,
I'm next on the list.
okay, go
Chad
ahead.
Furman is next.
Chad Furman, go ahead.
So Chad Furman, 6136 Pine Bluff Drive. What I was going to ask is the last 2 months, 4 has gone first and opposed has gone last, which I feel like gives a little bit of a competitive advantage. And I don't know if we can do that tonight where opposed goes first and 4 goes last.
Well, you're the only person who's speaking for tonight, so I guess we've already
agree.
crossed that
Okay.
bridge.
So it sounds like this is going to be homes. At some point, this is going to be homes. 20 years ago, it was approved to be homes. We have a builder that has actually, I represent the neighborhood. I'm the president of the HOA Association, Whispering Pines. We have given our neighborhood every opportunity to weigh in on this. We've had multiple meetings with just our neighborhood. We've had multiple meetings with the builders. This builder is wanting to work with us. They're wanting to be an extension of Whispering Pines. They're not wanting to come in and just be a separate neighborhood. We could have a builder come in and show no regard to our amenity area. They could just be separate. And those neighbors are going to find their way to our pool, to our, our picnic areas, to our playgrounds. If they're not a part of our neighborhood, we can't just put up a sign at our pool saying you're not allowed. They're going to find their way to that space. Rex, Melissa, David, they've all shown effort. David came out in the dead of winter and walked our pool with us. So they've shown effort in wanting to be a part of our neighborhood and be one neighborhood at the time that this is built out. That means a lot to me as a homeowner because I feel like Whispering Pines is special. I respect the opposition. I truly do. It feels like the opposition just doesn't want homes. I live in the neighborhood that this is going to most directly impact, and I feel like they're wanting to come in and build a home that is representative of the homes that are in there. Could bigger homes go in there, luxury homes go in there? Absolutely. Do I think that helps my property value when I come down, come time to sell? No, I don't. I feel like the home that they're wanting to put in is similar feel to what we live in today, and I'm very proud of the home that I live in today. So this builder has shown that they want to work with us. They've shown that they actually want to listen to what's important to us. And the homeownership, or the neighborhood in general is in favor of this. We've given our neighbors a chance to speak in opposition, and there hasn't been. So I respect, I can't even imagine how much this impacts you, and I am so sorry. So I respect Timber Bend. I respect the Vapor property. I truly do. I feel like we're the most greatly impacted, and we're here tonight speaking in favor.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and speak in support of this proposal? Okay. Who do we have signed up to speak against the proposal?
Kurt Vapor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kurt Vapor. I live at 4927 Silver Bell Drive in Plainfield. We own the 50 acres between Whispering Pines and Timber Bend. I want to thank the Avon planning staff. They've been very helpful throughout this. Also, we'll acknowledge that Pulte has made some concessions to us in their proposal, which we appreciate. A little history. When I was a kid, my granddad, his farm was 160 acres. And when he died, my aunt and uncle inherited 110 of those acres, and that is now part of Timber Bend. My mom inherited 50 acres that we own today, and that includes White Lick Creek, the original farmhouse, 7 original farm buildings on a property that was the site of the first commercial soybean operation in Indiana. My granddad asked my mom to keep the 50 acres in the family. She honored that request, and my parents moved to the farm in the 80s, and our daughter and her family live there now. Mom and Dad were very supportive of Timber Bend. My mom would say, if we have to have development, it might as well be nice houses. And obviously, Timber Bend is a great housing development. It's a showplace for Avon and Hendricks County. A couple years back, a Timber Bend home burned, and a beautiful new home that fits in well with other Timber Bend homes was built. I believe the listing price of this new home, which sold quickly, was nearly $900,000. In my opinion, Hendricks County, Brownsburg, Avon, Plainfield are all overbuilt with big prefabricated boxes with 2 small garages on 2 small lots. And it's hard to understand why Avon wants to put more of these big prefabricated boxes next to a showplace like Timber Bend, or for that matter, next to a historic farming property. It's also hard to understand adding higher density housing along 625 East, which is already overly congested and restrained by very inadequate intersections. So with these thoughts in mind, my request to this board is to reject the rezoning request and to retain R1 zoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Libby Whipple.
Thank you. My name is Libby Whipple. I live at 1824 Water Oak Way, which is in Timber Bend. I first want to call attention to a handout that you on the Plan Commission received, put together by a neighbor of mine, Nathan Logan, who also lives bordering this land in question. He was at the first 2 zoning meetings. He's not able to be here because of family obligation. I also passed this out to some of the people. I just want to call attention that it gives a feel for the Pulte neighborhoods that we've been told to go look at, see what they look like. So I want to call your attention to that Nathan Logan put together. If you recall, the first of these 3 planning meetings, we had a huge crowd here. And I asked for people opposed to Pulte's petition to stand, and we had a huge outpouring. Now, I have to be quite honest, most of the people in Timber Bend have given up hope in thinking that Avon will maintain high standards for this property. I have to admit that there's a lot about all this jargon with all the zoning and everything that I don't understand, but I do understand this. I understand that if you approve Pulte's amended petition, you are lowering the standards for building on this land. And the president of the HOA of Whispering Pines said he thinks we don't want anything built there. We know there will be homes there. But if you approve this amended petition, you are lowering the standards for what can now be built there. The lots will be smaller. The houses will be closer together. Pulte wants to emphasize that the square footage of the homes will be bigger, which actually just increases the look of the higher density. We're going to have bigger box homes on smaller lots. And I really appreciated Mr. Guckenberger's question about, does it have to be, does it have to be 64? Do you have to have the smaller lots? No. It was originally in 2003 set to be 64 homes, which would have met R1 and had higher commitments. The 2003 commitments are even higher than R1. And that's why it was 64, because 64 could fit in there and meet the R1 requirements. 64 no longer can fit on that property and meet the R1 requirements. That's why they are requesting lowering the standards to R2. 64 is not a magic number. It doesn't have to stay 64. There will be homes there. It could be fewer than 64. It will lower property values if we have a bunch of large box homes on smaller lots. Thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you very much. Next.
David Leonhardt.
Good evening. Thanks for having the hearing. My name's Dave Lenhart. I reside at 2028 Aspen Drive. It's in Timber Bend development area. Throughout the planning committee reviews and the public hearings I've attended, I think the committee's been well aligned with their obligations to the Avon residential community as it's reflected in their minutes, all the way through February 24th. Then during the 24th meeting of last month, there was 11th hour submittal of a new plan by the petitioner, Pulte Homes, that required the committee to kind of kick the can down the road because they have to review it. And it made sense. So I read the minutes in preparation for this meeting today, and I'm grossly disappointed. Until today, the planning committee has consistently applied the existing statutory guidance criteria in the correct spirit of protecting the integrity and the value of the zoning and existing commitments for the development of Whispering Pines South. Each committee meeting minutes correctly applies the development proposals by Pulte Homes as falling short of the protections that the current zoning and commitments provide to the residential communities that are adjacent properties. Each committee meeting minutes sum up their analysis with this statement. Staff does not see a compelling reason to upzone the property. This is spot on. There's never been a compelling reason that's been provided to justify downgrading, not upzoning, you're downgrading the current protections of all the residents that are in the adjacent properties that's provided in the 2003 zoning and commitments. These protections were intentional, they were purposeful, they were to ensure the integrity and the value of the residential community landscape of the whole area, that it not be compromised. This should be the primary driving motivation for this planning committee. What's in the best interest of the residents of Avon? Not only has Pulte Homes failed to provide a resemblance of a compelling reason to downgrade the property, zone and commitments that are already assigned to WPS, which, by the way, they've already committed to by assuming the property. The reason provided by Pulte Homes was a self-serving survey that allegedly revealed today's homeowner desires smaller properties. Recall the reaction to this claim. The roaring laughter of the overcrowded standing room only filled room was deafening. You had to call the meeting back to order. This planning committee should go back and listen to that tape. Make sure that you refresh yourselves on exactly why Pulte Homes is doing what they're doing. To be clear, the reference to upzone is nothing more than downgrading. Downgrading the smaller lots, downgrading the current zone and commitments of the WPS is advantageous to only one party, Pulte Homes.
Your time is up, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully you listen.
Next.
Michelle Tallman.
Hello, thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Michelle Tallman, and I live in Timber Bend. I'm located at 2195 Laurel Leaf Lane. Been a resident in Timber Bend for 28 years and lived in Avon my entire life. I'm definitely against the rezoning request. My main item of concern is a safety concern. The question I have is the infrastructure support not only this development, but the other developments within a 2-mile radius. I don't understand how this could actually be answered without a traffic study. My understanding is there's not one that's been done. I mean, currently we have a development in a 2-mile radius that just I'm aware of by driving by would be Rivendell. That's by Pulte. That's just north of County Road 100 South and County Road 625 South. And then you have the Avalon North development that's at Gibbs Road and Vestal Street. Those are within a mile of this development. I mean, if anyone's ever drove on 625 South and went past that so-called four-way stop that everybody honks and they, flip people off and just all kinds of things, yell at each other, I don't know how that's going to handle more cars. I think that's an issue, not to mention you have the farming, property that's the farm. Their road is right next to where where Pulte's proposing having an exit, and it's across from another exit, which would be from Bridgewater. So you got 3 streets coming together there and exits for cars trying to get on 625 South. You got a roundabout now just north of there. It's going to be overloaded. Not to mention you got Timber Bend North exit that's right close by those 3 other roads. So I think that's a concern. So my question would be, does infrastructure actually support it? And I'd ask the council to consider requesting Pulte to do a traffic study and then have an independent party such as the town of Avon. I don't know if we got an appointed traffic engineer, but appoint one and have them review it so we can see what's this going to do to traffic. Because I do think it's going to be a safety issue. The other thing I want to mention is the Pulte representative had mentioned that the lot width on the southern parameter next to Timber Bend was 110 feet. And so that's above what R1 is, which is 90 feet. That's true, but I want to keep in mind, make sure everybody's aware that in Timber Bend, the average lot size width is 125 feet. So even upping it to 110 feet is not even close to what the current is at what's going to border the southern border. In addition, in the southern border, we have a concern when we're looking at it. There was talking about keeping that a common area that's bordering Timber Bend. Does that mean that people's going to be walking across that? So we're going to have noise in the back in that common area? That's the question to consider. I don't know. So maybe Pulte can answer that when they come up for the rebuttal. But I do ask the council to remember that their decision sets a precedence for just not this land, but the adjoining land. For instance, the vapor farm, if that gets sold, or any property that gets sold that's adjoining.
Your time is up.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Betty Harrington.
Good evening, Betty Harrington, 2141 Laurel Leaf Lane. I kind of want to start with going back to the very beginning, which was Pulte Homes threatening that if this doesn't get done, they're not going to exchange the land next to the high school with Avon Community Schools. And I thought it was a very interesting way for this whole process to begin with a very, I'm guessing, very real threat. They then threatened Whispering Pines that if you don't get on board, we're going to take out all the trees in your haunted trail. We're going to make it so the thing that you love so much and makes you unique is gone. And so my daughter lives in Whispering Pines. And so we live in Timber Bend. We live close together. And so that everything goes from this position of power to get in line, or all we want is for the board to maintain what has already been decided. 20-some years ago, another developer came and said, please don't keep this as ag, let us develop homes. They got R1, they made commitments. We're just asking that you make Pulte stick to those commitments. They're now asking for R2 and they say, oh, we're gonna have commitments. Well, what does that mean? It kind of means nothing. If they can just be changed. And so we understand homes are going to be built here. This is a very unique place. It's a beautiful place in Avon. It's one of your last chances to have big lots with nice houses instead of a shoehorned box neighborhood. And so we're just asking that you require them to maintain the commitments that were originally given to the board a long time ago and to make this R1. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next.
Bill Harrington.
Bill Harrington, 2141 Laurel Leaf Lane. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association in Timber Bend. I just want to be really clear. Our board has never been contacted by Pulte. They may have talked to some individual neighbors in Timber Bend. No outreach. That's the neighbor we're talking about.
Okay, next.
That is all that are signed up.
Is there anybody else present who would like to come forward and speak? Paul, how much time do we have left on the 20 minutes? Quite a bit. Quite a. Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward and speak to demonstrate against this petition? Okay, that being said, the petitioner now has an opportunity for rebuttal. And normally it's 5 minutes, but because we've doubled everything else, we'll go ahead and give you 10.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, David Compton, back before you again. Made quite a few notes. I guess I'd like to first address the idea that we're threatening people. We don't ever threaten people. This is a legislative decision, okay? Yes, our agreement with the school corporation involves, we have a piece under contract adjacent to the high school. They have identified 2 pieces as excess real estate that they'd like to sell. We're before you to ask, not demand, your consideration of the modifications that we put forth tonight. Additionally, with the Homeowners Association, we feel we've got a better plan by expanding the common area. I think it was well said, this original plan is 27 years old. The world has changed. Your own UDO has changed where you've reduced the minimum lot size for R1 down to 90 feet. As far as speculation on lot size, we build across the United States. We study buyers hard and what they want in their houses very hard because it's our livelihood. Just like when you go buy a car, you'll see that the evolution has happened within the car industry. The same thing happened in the housing industry. So we study what our buyers want at all levels, whether it be the first move up, second move up, or even empty nesters like myself. Again, I think it's important to remember we've been through TAC. The Technical Advisory Committee of Avon did not request a traffic study. 64 lots are approved. 64 lots are what's being given. Yes, the lot size is smaller. The house size is bigger. As far as the common area on the south property line, that's there to protect the trees. We can put in that it's not public common area for a picnic or anything like that. We can put that into documents. But again, we put that tree line next to the Vapor driveway because we do not adjoin Timber Bend. It's Timber Bend, then the Vapor driveway, then Pulte. And so we're happy to put that in some type of common area restriction, Madam Chairman, to further say that that's not a picnic area for that. As part of preparing for tonight, we looked at the last 12 months of sales in the town and within Washington Township. So this goes outside the town of Avon, okay, within the Avon school system. In regards to that, 96% are below $600,000 and 91% are below $500,000. What we want to do here is be complimentary to Whispering Pines and respectful to Timber Bend, but with an average sales price, we believe between $525 to $650. We believe we provide an excellent move-up opportunity for people that live in Avon and want a new house to move up within the community. So that's another thing that's driving why we're in front of you tonight to present. Again, we try to be a good neighbor with the Vapors. Had several, probably met with them 4 different times. A fence that was not, if we go away, it's not a threat, it's just a fact. There's not a fence required. If someone just comes in and plats into the existing commitments, there is no fence required. It was a private contract between Bruce Scolaire and the Vapors, and we wanted to be good neighbors and honor that. We also agreed to fill in the trees. So we're not here threatening, we're trying to build a better project and be respectful of neighbors. We reached out, I was talking to Melissa, we reached out to the Homeowners Association. Mrs. Whipple is very active in it. I'm not sure why they didn't contact the board, but they weren't on the 660 feet or 2 property owners. So we reached out to the neighbors. We had very good attendance at our 2 meetings with the Whispering Pines and with the Timber Bend people. So the board could contact by phone number, email address has been out there. The Vapors have it, Ms. Whipple has it. So we will continue to make ourselves available to meet with them if the board would like to meet with us. So we feel like we put together a really good project, but again, it's your decision on going forward. We look forward. We've been active in Avon for quite a period of time in other projects and appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. So hopefully I've addressed some of those questions, but if you have additional questions, we'll try to answer them. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for the petitioner?
How
Okay.
many homes can you build with the R1 zoning the way it is from 2003?
We haven't done a layout with that because we didn't, Greg, look at it with the existing pond being expanded versus 2 ponds. So if you look at the layouts, we lose a street. It's, I don't know how many less than 64 it would be, but it's not a significant number if you increase the size of the existing pond, which would be allowed by any developer who was standing in front of you tonight. We just felt like the 85 feet matches the existing Whispering Pine neighbors, and the 110, there's actually, I did some math, I think there's 8 houses that directly adjacent to us from Timber Bend, 8. And that's their back property line, the Vapor driveway, and again, the tree preservation, and then us. Our transition on our land plan is 9. So we talk about zoning and transitions. I feel like we've got a good transition. And 125 feet versus 110 with a house that's 50 or 60 feet wide, you still got plenty of side yard. You're still going to have a nice big open house. The 150-foot deep lots are fantastic. That's in excess of what we do across the city. So I think that's also going to make this attractive. So I don't have a direct answer. I'm not trying to dodge it, Greg. I just would have to speculate.
I think that might help, but another question then is the 64 lots that you've landed on.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that, or is that just the 64 that was approved in 2003?
Well, I think we got that, and if you look at the land plan, there's actually some infrastructure that was put in that could have been relocated to get to 65, but we were signaled very directly by staff that said, hey, 64 was a number that was approved in 2003. We would feel comfortable with no more than 64 in your revised proposal. So it honestly worked out. There could have been 65 if we had relocated a storm sewer pipe, and we decided not to, left that as green space.
But how did you get to 71 then, originally?
71 would have allowed for 80-foot wide lots in the upper area, Greg, instead of 85s. A slightly different, less tree preservation than we did, and smaller lots along the south property line. I think were we hundreds along the south property line originally? So we went from hundreds to 110s, 80s to 85s, and then increased the common area in tree preservation up in the northwest corner, and that all brought us down to 64.
My last question, have you given it any thought, the lots that are just north of Timber Bend, that those be all rezoned R1 to meet the R1 standards that were in the 2003 report?
When you say R1, I'm confused because they are today 120s, right? Yeah. They had see the R1 standards. I mean, your R1 standards today are 90 feet.
What about if it met it says here's the Timber Bend typical 125?
Would that actually be going wider than the original 2003 zoning? Because the original 2003 zoning was 120 feet by commitment for RB. And I guess, I think that, again, I'm going to circle back and I know we've worked together in Avon in the past. You've been on the council a long time. I would still stand by that the increase in the square footage is not insignificant. You know, it helps guarantee more than anything else, if another builder is standing here, that you get a better quality, a bigger house throughout this entire section. by increasing the square footages by 400 square feet on the ranches and 600 square feet on the 2 stories.
There's one more question. There was a question by someone about the infrastructure. Do you want to address that? Is the infrastructure available? Because I'll ask staff that question unless you want to address
When you
it.
say-
Water, sewer.
Yes, yeah, infrastructure, this was always planned to be 64 lots, so infrastructure is there. The storm sewer actually comes into this section. Water and sewer are stubbed. I think from a traffic standpoint, one improvement that's been made is Avon made in which it was not insignificant, the investment on a roundabout at the intersection of the intersection coming in here. So I would argue that today the traffic flow along 625 at the intersection is better than it was back in 2003 when this was contemplated, because there was no roundabout, and roundabouts slow down traffic. Yes, they're a pain. I live with them myself, but they do provide traffic calming and better, higher level of safety. So yes, water, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer outfalls are available to the site without taxing the infrastructure of the area.
I mean, all the houses will be on city water and.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, in the 2003 plan called for the road to tie into the road across the street in Bridgewater.
Yes, it did. Yep. There was a question in our earlier hearing, but it was part of the original plan. Yes, Greg.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you
so
very much, ma'am. Thank you.
We now move on to discussion. We've heard this agenda item 3 times now, with obviously a lot of input from our community and feedback and adjustments by the petitioner. One thing that strikes me is that if we didn't have our ordinances, or if we didn't have our criteria, this would make a lot of sense. We are transitioning between Whispering Pines and Timberlake. They are 2 different types of neighborhoods. This property is not an extension of Timberlake and should not be expected to meet all of the criteria of Timberlake. It's not, but it is an extension of Whispering Pines. And therefore, to me, that seems to be, having the transition from north to south in order to make it easy visually, aesthetically, everything else. This would make sense. But we do have criteria. And one of the first criteria is there compelling reason to go from R1 to R2? And I'm not sure I've heard that. I've heard good reasons, but I've not heard compelling reasons. This is clearly going to be developed. I agree that I think there are people here who just don't want it to be developed. And I can appreciate that. I've lived in a house where I lived across from a beautiful field with woods, and then houses went up. And I just cringed every time I saw another construction truck pulled up. But that's the nature of growth, and we are growing town. Those are my thoughts. I'm not sure we have a compelling reason, although I hear good reasons. And that is the first criteria,
I have a question for staff
or the second criteria, rather.
on the lot sizes, and I can't put my fingers on, so I'd like you to help me on this. As far as if this remains R1, what is the lot size for that area?
So the minimum lot size for R1 is 15,000 square feet, as you can see at the top of this exhibit, and a 90-foot minimum lot width. Those are the minimum standards for R1. Obviously, there are existing commitments that you're looking at modifying that currently apply to this property, which require larger lot widths and a larger lot size along the perimeter.
So the original commitments, is it 120?
So the commitments in effect right now are a 100-foot lot width and a 15,000 square foot lot size. The lot size would match the existing R1 zoning, but a 100-foot lot width for most of the property. And then you have the higher standards here along the south property line. And then this is what's being proposed down here, 85 feet and 12,750, which obviously are below the R1 standard. They're above R2, but below the R1. So that's the reason for the need to rezone to R2 in order to do this. And then you would have 110 and 16.5 for the lots along the south perimeter, as opposed to what's currently in effect here.
Okay. So to the question that Greg asked, as far as like having the south houses be R1, we have to rezone the entire plot, not just part of it, so it's rezoned R2 with the commitment for those individual plots to be larger than what the R2 zoning. So they put commitments in for the lot sizes, but it needs to go to R2 because they all wouldn't conform to R1.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and I think the other thing to make mention here is the Timber Bend typical lot size is greater than our R1 requirement. So we turn this down and somebody comes in and wants to build to the R1 commitment, they're going to go from what they like is 125 down to 90 is the minimum, correct? Width, and 15,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet. But our developer here is, I don't want to use the word compromise, but presenting something that's greater than that, but still less than a typical timber bend. But the typical timber bend is not an R1 or R2 zoning. So whoever comes in here, they will have the same comments to that builder, but that builder doesn't have to meet their typical timber bend standards, right? I mean, we can turn this down and somebody else comes in and does R1 and we can't, which to me, I think is worse than what's being presented.
Well, if this rezoning and request for modification of commitments is turned down, then the property is still going to be held to these standards right now from the existing commitments in 2003. So
Which is 100.
100 for most of the lots and 120 along the south
Right.
boundary. So somebody else couldn't come in and build at 90 feet without modifying these commitments.
The commitments are attached to the current zoning, right?
Correct.
So do these need to both pass together to be able to really make sense? So if we would approve a rezone to R2, but not approve the commitment changes.
I was going to ask
That would
Mr.
basically
Taylor
have
that.
no effect at all that I can foresee, because if you really rezoned to R2 and kept the commitments in effect, then the minimum lot size, lot width, even side setbacks would all greatly exceed what's normally allowed in R2. So
Right.
that approving a rezoning to R2 without approving the commitments would practically not change anything
So if we
with those commitments still being in effect.
approved our, okay.
So, Mr. Taylor, do we need to address the zoning first and then the commitments? Or,
I think you need to do the rezone first.
okay,
And also, you're not approving anything.
or
You're making
recommending?
recommendations. Well,
Right.
it's important.
Sorry. Just so that you all understand, we're not the final voice. We make a recommendation to the town council. Town council makes the final vote. So just thank you for clarifying that. So I guess our options are, we don't approve the rezone at all, and it just stays where it is. We approve the rezone, but we don't approve the change in the commitments. We approve the rezone and we approve the change in commitments. I don't see, we can't approve the commitments and not approve the zoning. That's not a real option.
I want to point out and ask staff the question here. A change from R1 to R2 introduces some potential additional permitted uses. And so if we are going to consider even changing this, making it forward a favorable recommendation for R2, but not wanting, I wouldn't want to see by special exception, the additional permitted uses that R2 would bring. I would want to put a condition that the permitted uses for this would have to mirror what R1.
So like no assisted living,
No nursing home.
no nursing home, right?
No hospital.
Right.
It is interesting. Fairgrounds is in R1. I would say no fairgrounds, but
Really?
by special exception.
So I don't think staff would have any objection if you wanted to add that commitment. I would presume that the petitioner doesn't also. You might want to just see if they have any comment on that.
Does the petitioner have any objection to adding those?
No objection.
Okay. I think there's a compelling argument that this is, given the nature of Timber Bend and the nature of the existing Whispering Pines, there's been a lot of work put into this to, the word was used, compromise. I think that's appropriate in order to make that transition from R2 to the north to R1, even better than R1 to the south.
To the point that you made, and for us to consider, I think, is a point that was made by Mr. Furman here, that this development connects to Whispering Pines. It doesn't connect to Timber Bend. So, his points that he's making of the use of the amenities center, you got two connections through roads there. It's an extension of Whispering Pines. So that's something, because I was the same way. I think the point you made of, is there a compelling reason for this change? That, yes, it's been 20 years, but that was a commitment for that development that got approved. I think probably in the county at the time, but that got approved. So regardless of that, the point that this is a reflection of Whispering Pines, probably more Timber Bend, although neighbors to Timber Bend, it seems like the attempt to have the land, the plots there that neighbor Timber Bend to reflect a little closer to R1 or to the same size as lots in Timber Bend, or at least concession 2. We are abutting you, so we're trying to look as if your neighboring plots here.
It's
look
it's
similar.
yes, it's an acknowledgement that there is a neighborhood adjoining this property or abutting this property that is of a different, it's just a different neighborhood. They have larger homes, larger lots. A lot of them are I think most of them are custom homes, if not a lot of them, which is very different from Whispering Pines. And this is a Whispering Pines extension. Other comments, thoughts?
So I think the key factor here that we're discussing is really the written commitments and not the zoning. Because the written commitments are about the lot sizes. And from what I hear, that's the only concern I'm getting from Timber Bend is the lot sizes, not the quality of construction or any of that, because none of that is really determined by the current commitments. There's a few things about facades and things like that. I think what we've gotten from Pulte in this scenario is some commitments to architectural standards that are not currently listed in the written commitments. So while the lot sizes go down, there is a commitment to a certain lot or a certain architectural standard. I think in excess of the UDO, as I read it. So is that a compelling reason to allow for a different zoning? I don't know exactly, but I think what it tells you is that there is some intention to align with Whispering Pines in excess of what current Whispering Pines is doing, to create a community, Whispering Pines community, that is coherent rather than like separated or exclusionary.
While acknowledging that there is another neighborhood that is different
Correct.
and trying to make that transition on the southern side.
I agree.
Any other conversation, discussion, thoughts, questions for staff? If there is no further conversation, then let's entertain a motion. And I believe we should, as Mr. Taylor pointed out, we need to do the zoning first, so it'd be ZA 2411, followed by, oh, and we would ask that the letters in support and in remonstrance of this hearing be put into the record. We have a stack here, and as always, we are very appreciative that our community engages as much as they do. Do we hear a motion on ZA 2411?
All right, I will make a motion that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for ZA 2411 Whispering Pines South, a zoning map amendment to rezone 32.16 acres from R1 to R2, subject to the commitments proposed by the petitioner and in line with permitted use of R1 properties. Since it has satisfied all the requirements for a zoning map amendment under state law.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Having heard a
If I
motion,
can, I'm sorry, if I can just clarify, I believe the petitioner agreed to an additional commitment, and I just want to put that on the record.
that was, yes, that's what he said about agreeing that the permitted uses would align with R1.
I think that's one way to do it. I guess I was hearing Mr. Guggenberger concerned about the 3 uses that would be added as special exceptions and going to R2. So maybe it would be cleaner just to prohibit those 3 uses. I don't know if.
Are those
You
the
just
only?
add a commitment that single-family detached shall be the only permitted use. That could be pretty simple as well. I just want to make sure it's clear on the record what that commitment should say.
As opposed to just saying R1. I don't have any objection to that,
Because if R1 changes.
because R1 could change, right, exactly.
Would it be
Okay.
cleaner if I reread it that way? Just to read the whole thing over again? Okay. And so that would include, just to clarify, for single-family detached dwellings only. Is that how we would want it stated? Okay.
I think, yeah.
All right, so let's try this again. I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for ZA 2411 Whispering Pines South, a zoning map amendment to rezone 32.16 acres from R1 to R2, subject to the commitments proposed by the petitioner with the addition of allowance for only single-family detached resident or dwellings, since it has satisfied all the requirements for the zoning map amendment under state law.
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Rockerbrand,
4.
Reed,
4.
Kaufman,
4.
Ransberg,
4.
Guggenberger,
4.
Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries. ZA 2411 is passed. And we now move on to WC 2401, which is the modification of written commitments.
Mr. Taylor, did you review these? The petitioner's proposed additional comments and amendments.
Yes.
I thought there was one in here that I saw where they excluded certain builders and we cannot do that. Is that true? Be page 34.
Yeah, that's from.
Yeah, that's the existing, that's already there. They aren't modifying that.
That's in the current.
Yes.
Okay.
That's in the current, that was in the 2003 version.
And then there was a.
Their changes are shown in blue.
And then there was something in here too about rental limitations of no more than 20%.
What page are you on again?
That was on your ZA 2411, page 13.
I think the most recent version is on page 32, isn't it? 33? Because there's a,
Yeah, well,
those other ones are voided, weren't they? Well, those are the original, yeah, those are original commitments.
yeah, those are all the original commitments.
You're talking Exhibit D? The revised ones are on page 32 through 35 or something.
You know, that's a commitment. That's,
And you're okay
and that's
with-
different. Yeah, that's different than it not being a commitment. There, I'll just say it that way.
Thank you.
There's no further discussion. We'll entertain a motion for WC 2401, which is the modification of written commitments.
I'll make the motion. I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for WC 2401, Whispering Pines South commitments, a modification of written commitments to change existing restrictions regarding lot size, lot width, side yard setbacks, architectural requirements, et cetera, from Hendricks County rezoning amendment petition ZA 299 WA 0304, which were incorporated in the town of Avon zoning upon annexation of the property in 2006, subject to the commitments proposed by the petitioner and the additional one added tonight by the commission, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a modification of written commitments under state law.
I'll second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Guckenberger,
4.
Kaufman,
4.
Rockabrand,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Ransberg,
4.
Reed.
4.
CA 2411 passes. Thank you very much. I believe this would be a good time to take a short recess. Turn my microphone on, I guess. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, which is ZA 2413 Briarwood.
Okay, this mic's not as touchy as the rest. Okay. ZA 2413, which is known as Briarwood, is a petition before you by Dries Homes. This petition has been amended since you initially saw it, I believe, 2 months ago. Or was it last month? 2 months ago. So it came before you with the first two addresses, 590 and 606 North County Road 900, and then it's been amended to add 3 more properties, 2 homes, but 3 parcels, addressed at 554 and 576 North County Road 900. So it started as 16.65 acres and it's been amended to 18.23 acres. And the current zoning is ag in Avon as well as ag in the county. The history on this property, it's currently unimproved. There is a house still on it, but it's otherwise undeveloped. There was a rezoning petition in 2022 to rezone it to R2 to provide for a single-family residential development, which was denied. The subject site, the majority of the subject site was annexed to the town in 2021 and 2022. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 added properties that are within the county but have a current super voluntary pending petition to be annexed into the town. So this request is to rezone 18.23 acres from ag and county ag to the R4 classification to provide for a 55-lot single-family subdivision. This was the original request you saw 2 months ago, so it was this larger parcel here and then 2 smaller parcels in here. And then if you look here, this is how it's been expanded. The 3 additional parcels are out here along 900. This is the zoning of the property showing the ag in here. You'll see it's primarily surrounded by county unincorporated land, but adjoining zoning near it across County Road 900 is R4. To the south is a county subdivision, and then an R2, which is a church, and an R4, which is the new Village Place townhomes. And then further north on 900 is an R5 development, the browner color there. This is the comprehensive plan recommendation, which recommends specialty housing. The specialty housing category, if you're not familiar with it, basically is to recommend anything other than single or 2-family residential, basically to find a place for different kinds of housing, such as townhomes and apartments within the town. So the surrounding area that I mentioned, I wanted to go through the densities of them. Carolina Commons is the subdivision to the north at 2.138 units per acre. Austin Lakes to the west, 2.16. Prairie Manor is to the south at 1.13. Eden Gates, the one across 900 at 3.95 units an acre. Stonehaven, which was that R5 further north of the site, is at 3.74 units per acre. And the proposed density today that you're looking at is 3.04. The petitioners submitted some commitments that generally limit the site to 55 lots for single-family detached homes and with a 50-foot or 53-foot wide lot. This is the site plan you saw 2 months ago. And the main thing we talked about was the entrance being up to the north on 900, up in here, and that it was only 200 feet from
the proposed entrance to the Dillon Drive, which is in here. It's the entrance into Eden Gate. And with only 200 feet, the entrance for the new subdivision could only be a right-in, right-out, meeting the separation requirements because you need 300 feet to have a full access interchange or intersection. So they continued the case at that time to kind of go back to the drawing board, and staff encouraged them to try to acquire those 3 properties to make a safe subdivision, to basically get the street to line up and, you know, from a planning perspective, make it as safe as possible. So this is the new layout, the new subdivision where they've acquired those parcels. It lines up exactly with Dillon Drive. It does have all its required A-cell, D-cell, turn lanes that would be required by town standards. So no waivers for separation would be needed with the new requirement. I'd like to point out on this map here, the next thing we're going to be talking about is not something that you're going to be deciding, because it would be done at the plat stage. Well, you would be deciding, but at a later date when the plat is filed. And that is, from the previous case to now, they've increased the number of lots by 6. As you're aware, our ordinance limits the number of homes that can be on one access to 50 or 49, and then this would be 55 lots. Unfortunately, if you look at the subdivision to the north and the subdivision to the west and the subdivision to the south, the county didn't do its best job at providing us any access points or stub streets to help us out with the situation we're presented with here today. So ideally, this could connect to a stub street in one of those subdivisions, but it can't. So in exchange for the additional lots, the petitioner has proposed a fairly wide, 70-foot wide right-of-way for the entrance that will be a boulevard. The town, as I understand from the town manager and the town public works director, has always considered boulevarded entrance, separated boulevarded entrance, to be the same as 2 separate entrances, because it would allow an emergency vehicle to get in or out should one of those lanes be blocked. I also want to touch on the number 50 that we use. It is kind of an arbitrary number. Every community has a different magic number for what that is. And as far as we understand, that there's been no, full-on study of what that magic number should be. I went and checked other jurisdictions. Hendricks County uses the same number 50, which is probably where we got it from. Plainfield says 30, but the divided boulevard allows you to have more, as long as once you get in there, there's more than one direction happening, which is the case here. So this would be permitted in Plainfield. In Brownsburg, they would like you to have a second entrance between 21 and 99 lots, but one of those can be a stub, so you never know if that's going to be developed, and it only requires it at 100 lots. Also mentioning the boulevard entrance is desired for the higher numbers. So what I'm getting to here is the difference between 49 and 55 lots for this particular subdivision, done with a boulevard entrance and done to increase exponentially the safety of this intersection, we think is desirable for this parcel to be developed. The previous density that you were shown 2 months ago was 2.99 units per acre. And when they added the 6 lots, because they also added acreage, the density is 3.04 now, which is negligible as far as the overall density is concerned. Getting back to the criteria for the rezone, as I said, they wanted to go to R4. The reason for the R4 is for the width of the lots they're proposing. The density they are proposing is essentially an R2. The R2 limit is 3 units an acre, and they're proposing 3.04. But they want a smaller width lot for the style of homes they are proposing. And that you would think would then push them into R3, but we believe that our width requirements versus our density requirements are somewhat off because they have to go to a higher density in the R4 to get the 53-foot wide lots that they're wanting. So essentially, yes, it's an R4, but the density of it is an R2. I want to run down through the criteria for a rezoning. As I mentioned earlier, this criteria number 1, the comprehensive plan, does recommend specialty housing, which does not include what is proposed in front of you. So it would not necessarily meet this criteria. However, the site is completely surrounded on all 4 sides by single-family detached residential uses. So we would think that the most desirable and best use for this property would be single-family detached homes. Criteria 2, current conditions and character of the current structures and uses in the district. A new single-family development would be consistent with the current conditions and character of the area. Criteria 3, the most desirable use for which each zoning district is adapted. We again think that a single-family residential subdivision would be the most desirable use on this property, given its surroundings on all 4 sides. Criteria 4, the conservation of property values. We have no reason to believe that it would have any substantial effect on property values throughout the district. And criteria 5 is one that has changed from 2 months ago because we did not think they met criterion 5 before because of the access point lining up. And now that it would be lining up, we do believe that this is meeting criteria 5 for responsible growth and development. Therefore, staff is recommending that you forward a favorable recommendation to the town council, subject to our standard commitments for right-of-way, impact fees, plat, and then the commitments that they have voluntarily shown you today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I do want to point out also that they have increased the amenities on the site. They originally did not show much in the way of amenities. I think it was just because it was a sketched down site plan, but they have shown amenities throughout the middle. There is a butterfly garden, increased landscaping, some benches here. So it'll be more of a passive recreation area, but they are showing increased amenities that are not required by the UDO.
So Linda, one of the things that, and maybe I'd ask you or Paul to prepare, just like last case, if we would forward a favorable recommendation, what I would like, and I'd ask the commission to consider this, that we have restricted permitted uses in R4. R4 allows for a lot of things. And just like, I mean, I'm looking at ag, and ag seems more closely aligned R1 than it does R4, that I would want to restrict anything. Some of the things that are could be in R4.
So up on the screen for you now is the petitioner's voluntary commitments that they've presented to you, or they will present to you tonight. And number 3 mentions only single family detached.
Okay, so that would be okay. And then I'm going to go back, and you've heard this before. We had the development on 100 North by Kingsway, where we had a boulevard entrance, a single entrance into that development. And this is what I see here is that, and I have a concern about that. I will continue. I don't support that. I don't care if it's a boulevard and it's wide. It's one entrance, and an accident could consume that entrance, even though it's wide. And I think, unlike in what that development did, they provided a access that isn't a road, but could be used to get into that neighborhood if they wanted to. And I don't see, maybe this is something that we can talk about the petitioner with, but I think one access point, yeah, 50, you talked about that. It's a standard, it's an ordinance, it's not a guideline. We have that cutoff, so that's what we have to work with. And we see development up to 49, so they don't have to have those additional requirements when you hit 50 or above. So I get it, and I understand it's kind of a guideline, and it's different, but that is what it is. And if it's not going to be what we should have, then we should adjust our ordinances to reflect what would be a good number, which then we'll have this discussion probably a lot, because we'll always see that encroachment on that number. So I understand and I appreciate the data that you provided us from the rest of the county, because I think that's important for us to consider. But, I have a concern about one entry point into a development that we say over a certain number requires 2 access points. So I guess I'm not really looking for a comment back. That's a comment for the commission to consider as we then consider this, maybe for the petitioner to help with addressing.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the density of the surrounding neighborhoods? So the least dense neighborhood is Prairie Manor, which is to the south, correct?
Correct.
And then we've got Eden Gate, which we've got 2 that are more dense.
I do want to point out Stonehaven is this brown one up here. It's not immediate adjacent,
Okay.
but the other 4 are the surrounding.
Do we know back in 2022, the reason why it was denied from ag to R2?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I think the petitioner does, though.
Thanks.
Are there any further questions for staff?
And Paul, getting back to your comment on the number of units, I just want to point out, I failed to mention that the Department of Public Works and the fire department have no issues with the number of homes on this lot. And yes, 50 is a number that we put in our ordinance, but again, we allow waivers for a reason, and that this particular property is constrained by not having any stub streets going to it, which is something that we require of every subdivision now. And it's very difficult to develop a piece of property, buy additional piece of property at staff's request, and then try to get it to develop within the parameters they need with the number of lots they would need to make the project work. So I think every lot and every property has individual characteristics, and that's the reason the waivers exist, that you can look at different parameters for it.
And I appreciate that information. And you said something that I didn't come pick up on, the number of lots to make the project work. And I don't feel like we should compromise safety to make a number, whether it's number of residents, houses, or dollars.
But if our safety experts are signing off on it, I think we should take that into consideration as well. I'm not a safety expert. I trust the people that we have on our staff who are safety experts.
Because of the boulevard 70-foot wide entrance, Public Works and Fire Department are okay with what is being presented tonight.
Any further questions for staff? If not, we'll have the petitioner come forward.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Dofer with Drees Homes. Address is 900 East 96th Street, Suite 100, 46240 in Indianapolis. I just want to thank Linda for such a great presentation tonight. She covered a lot of the stuff I was going to, so I can kind of fast forward through some of these. Just to quickly touch on the zoning and the uses again, We are mostly surrounded by county zoning, county uses, single-family detached with R4, a couple R4 projects just south and east of us, along with some R5 zoning. We are about half-mile north of US 36, along with those retail uses. And so keeping all of that in mind, that's why we are requesting an R4 zoning for our single-family detached ranch-style homes. And just a quick refresher, and Linda's already gone over this, but this was the original boundary of the site that we were looking at, very minimal frontage at 250 feet. And we heard Plan Commission the last time we were here in January. Big concerns about the safety of the entrance location and that offset. And so we were challenged with acquiring additional land to allow us to align our entrance with Eden Gate across the street. And here's a refresher for what that old concept plan looked like. Here's the 2 properties, really 3 parcels that we've since acquired. And just for perspective, these were 2 occupied homes. These are 2 occupied homes with families that have lived in the homes since 2015 and 2019. These were not families that were anticipating to move this year. So we came to a purchase price agreement with these families to bring them in on the project. And overall, that added 1.73 acres, bringing the total project to 18 acres. And here's the new concept plan. Again, we are requesting R4 zoning with commitments. And this has now allowed us to align the entrance with Eden Gate across the street to help us offset the added investment of buying 2 homes, the added cost of demolition, well abandonment, septic system removal, tree clearing, and other needed improvements with the extra wide 70-foot wide right-of-way for our boulevarded entrance. We have increased the lot count from 49 to 55. Because we've added the additional acreage to the project, the density has increased nominally from 2.99 to 3.04 units an acre. We understand the maximum lot count for one entrance is at 49 lots, but we have widened that right-of-way to 70 feet, which is larger than the minimum required 60 feet in DUDO. The boulevard entrance will allow it to effectively act as 2 entrance points, as Linda explained, Public Works, Fire Department are on board with this change. The open space has slightly changed as well, going from 20.6% to 20.3%. And then we've activated that open space, adding an internal trail system, gathering spaces, and the butterfly garden, in addition to the perimeter trail along 900. Our product remains the same. We are proposing for sale single-family detached homes, all single-story, targeted to empty nester buyers. Briarwood would offer 5 floor plans ranging from 1,500 to 2,700 square feet, 3 to 4 bedrooms, and 2 to 4 bathrooms. Our HOA covenants will prohibit playgrounds, basketball goals, trampolines to further make sure that buyers are empty nesters. We expect the average sales price of these homes to be about $425,000. Drees Homes is a semi-custom home builder. We are a family-owned and operated business that's been in business for 95 years. And we cater to the discernible buyer, meaning that our higher price point, our buyers value quality and choice. And our buyers get to choose the lot they want, the floor plan, the elevation, their color package, and they work with our design professionals in our design center to choose every detail of their home. We are a smaller builder in the Indianapolis area. For reference, last year we pulled about 221 permits in the 9-county Indianapolis area. By comparison, some of our publicly traded builders in the area pulled 1,000 to 2,000 permits. So we are not a fast-paced builder. We focus on slow builds, quality, working very closely with our buyers to make sure that they have a great home buying process. And because of that, we have a customer satisfaction score of 91% of our buyers would recommend us to family and friends. So as I've mentioned, we are requesting R4 with commitments. That R4 is truly because of the lot width, because these are empty nester targeted homes. The lots need to be smaller to allow for lower maintenance for empty nesters. And then to ensure that Briarwood is going to bring the type of quality that we're promising, we are adding all these commitments listed. Dedication of 50-foot half right-of-way along County Road 900, a maximum of 55 lots. Only single-family detached uses shall be permitted, or minimum lot size is going to be 6,600 square feet. Minimum lot width is going to be 53 feet. And then minimum living area is going to be 1,500 square feet. And we have a UDO comparison up there just showing that our density is really in line with R2. Our lot size is in line with R3. Again, that minimum width meets the R4 standards. Minimum ground floor area, we meet the R1 standards, and permitted uses, we're meeting the E1, R1, R2 single-family detached standards. And then looking at current home listings, we've mentioned that Briarwood will be an age-targeted empty nester community, and we'd like to discuss why this specific product type is really needed in the area. Last time when we spoke in January, we talked about how only 4% of listings were single-story homes built in the last 10 years. That's gone up to 4 listings currently. So again, if you're in the market for a single-story home, newer build, you have 4 options currently. And then recent sales over the last 12 months. So in January, we talked about there's been 610 sales from January 25 to January 24, and 35 of those, 6%, were single-story newer builds. Looking at March 25 to March 24, there's been 33 single-story sales, so 5% of the last year's sales. As part of the zoning process, we did do a traffic study. I believe the staff report quickly mentions it, but the feedback came back that the project needed a dedicated left turn lane. One of the reasons why we originally proposed a right in, right out was because of 2 parcels on the east side of 900 were extremely close to the road and we didn't want to impact them. Now that we are across the street from Eden Gate, we have room for a dedicated left turn lane. So we are able to meet the recommendations of the traffic study. And staff has hit on the rezoning criteria. We do believe that it meets the comprehensive plan. The #1 overall goal is encourage infill development. This is an infill development really challenged by the lack of stub streets. If there were stub streets, we wouldn't be talking about the number of homes or the boulevard entrance, but that is the challenge that this project faces. We do believe it is within the current conditions and character of the surrounding area. It's completely surrounded by single-family detached development, and so we do believe that empty nester, single-family detached best matches the character of the area. As staff has mentioned, this is the most desirable use. And we do believe it will conserve property values at an anticipated average sales price of $425,000. And again, this is responsible growth. HWC, who reviewed the traffic study, said they're not anticipating a significant impact on traffic operations. And again, this is going to provide housing options for existing Avon residents that want to stay in Avon and downsize and value customization. To quickly touch on our timeline, we've had a second neighborhood meeting since the last Plan Commission meeting, and we heard a lot of feedback on the current state of the property. And here's an aerial. There is an existing abandoned house on the property. There's often trespassers. There are windows broken out. There's an empty pool that's a safety hazard. There was a car recently stolen on one of the out parcels on 900. Avon deserves better. They deserve a better streetscape along 900 than what's currently there. They deserve quality, customized housing. Avon residents deserve a choice to stay in place, size down, stay close to their families, or move from out of town and be closer to their kids and grandkids and still have that quality. And we believe Briarwood will afford residents that option. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
What is the typical width of the house that is going on these properties?
40 feet.
40 feet. So it's 6-foot setback? Is that from eave to eave or is that wall to wall?
53 minus 40, that'll be 13. So yeah, about 6.5. That'll be from wall to wall.
Wall to wall?
Yep.
Okay. Is there expected overhangs on the sides?
Yes.
What are those typically?
I believe the UDO requires 11 inches and we'll meet that requirement.
Okay.
You know, you're going to take a piece of property, like you just said, that has issues, and we're all for that. And I don't think it's a matter of the type of homes you're putting in there or anything like that. And to me, it's the R4 zoning, and I've said that before. And now that you listened to us because you had a sense it may not have come through without the alignment into the Eden Gate. And I get it. Costs money, but now you've added 5 more parcels to it. Now you want a variance. And I agree with Paul. I said, you know, we have an ordinance for a reason. So if it's not correct, then we need to change it. And until we do that, I think we have to abide by it. And then when you look at that rendering there to the one that you had done prior, your entryway was to the north, so I'm not sure if you can create an emergency access point up there on the north side of that pond or not for the fire department for an accident if something does happen. Because the one that Paul referenced, I believe, is a boulevard, same type of boulevard entryway. And that's what they've done there. So those are my 2 things. There's the zoning. I think it can be done with an R2 and the number of units with a secondary access point.
You said that this is a neighborhood that's being targeted towards empty nesters, people who are looking to downsize. So they want smaller lots, they want smaller homes, they want single story. My knees sound like a percussion section going up and down stairs, so I certainly appreciate that. And I do appreciate the fact that we, as you know, East and Gray, the largest section of residential in East and Gray is 55 plus, all ranch, smaller, low maintenance. I don't know if this is meant to be no maintenance, but it'd be lower maintenance. So I appreciate the intent. I don't share the concern with regards to the single entrance simply because I trust our staff. And if, you know, our fire department is saying that they believe that this is can we come up with a scenario where that entrance would be completely blocked? Absolutely. But I don't think we should make decisions based on worst case possibilities. I think we should make decisions based upon the facts that we have in front of us. There is a reason we have a waiver process. We don't have stub streets going in here. Your other properties that are similar to this, and I'm assuming you have, would this be considered comparable? Would this be considered smaller than in terms of lot size? Would it larger? How would this compare to other similarly designed communities?
So because we are a smaller builder, we really specialize in enclave sized communities. So about 50 lots around there. As far as lot size, it really depends on the product. This specific product we're bringing over from Cincinnati. It's been extremely successful there, and we think it'll be extremely successful in the central Indiana area. And we're proposing it in several different projects currently. Did that answer your question, or can I expand a little bit more?
Well, so you said this product, you're talking about a neighborhood of ranch-style homes on very small lots designed for people who don't have families and being targeted at people who don't have families because they don't want big yards. They don't want to have to be cutting the grass all the time or cutting a lot of grass all the time. So you said this is being brought over from Ohio.
Yes.
Is this typical, or are these lots smaller? Are these lots larger? Are they standard? Is this?
This is a typical lot size for this product at 40 feet wide, and then at about 6-foot side yards. That does get you to 52, 53-foot wide lots.
Do you have communities that are aimed at the same demographic that have larger lots?
Not that I'm aware of. We really do focus on keeping the lots a smaller, more manageable size because, you know, there might be a single person living in that household. It could be 2 people living in the household. And so we need to make sure that the lot sizes are targeted towards a large enough buying segment that it's a comfortable size for a lot of different buyers, a lot of different empty nester buyers.
Because I can tell you, I guarantee probably half the people sitting in this audience right now are going to be talking about what everyone talks about whenever we have development on 900, and that is the traffic, and especially with the location of where that is. And as we all know, 900 is its own special nightmare that we don't have a lot of control over. But that is, to me, that's a bigger concern than the single entrance. But it's not something we necessarily can take into consideration because that's not from I guess it falls into safety. So, okay. Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to, has anybody signed up in support of this petition?
Not in support, no.
Has anybody signed up to remonstrate against the petition?
We have 2. First one is Ray Albee.
Okay. And we'll remind you that you have 2 minutes. Mr. Albee? Is Mr. Albee here? Okay. Who is the second person?
Brenda Pettigrew.
Mrs. Pettigrew? Ms. Pettigrew? Thank you.
And I'll direct your attention to the handout I gave you for this.
Okay.
person.
Was this your?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my name's Brenda Pettigrew. It's 8854 Prairie Trail. And my main concern is the R4 zoning. We are R1 and the neighborhood to the north of us is R2. And I just feel like you said, with Whispering Pines, the transition between the two would be much less significant change if it was R2 instead of R4. And however, I do support what they're doing. I really like the quality of the houses they're building, and I like their plan. So I was hoping that we could use R2 with commitments instead of the R4 with commitments. Because like you saw with Whispering Pines, if something falls through and in the future, maybe they don't get to do what they say they're going to be able to do, then you're back here again fighting the commitments. And somebody might want to, it's R4, so somebody might want to build apartments or whatever. And so I don't know how those commitments are going to be held up in the future. And so if we went to R2 with commitments, then we'd be safer. That's my thought anyway. So, and then you're talking about the traffic and everything. I feel like we just approved 80 townhomes to the north of us, to the south of us. So, you can't really say much to them if you've already approved 80 townhomes to the south. I don't think that's really we have horrible traffic, but you've already committed to the townhomes. So why would you not let them build That's what I was thinking too. So that's basically it. I just cannot see us being an R4 and then in the future having issues with that. But if they can do what they've said they're going to do, then that's good. But I'd rather it be an R2 with commitments instead of R4. So that's all.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come and speak on this agenda item? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Hi, thank you. Ron Fraser, 8806 Prairie Trail, Avon. So I'm part of the R1 subdivision to the south. We have got 16 houses on a larger acreage area. They're proposing 55 on a smaller acreage area. I'm going to be looking out at 3 houses straight directly out my back door, very close to me. To me, it'll look like a shanty town. Now, in regards to, it looks great. The picture looks really good, but the trouble is that all the trees are on our side of the property line. There is absolutely nothing on their side. So the greenery that you see there doesn't exist. It's a figment of their imagination. They're talking about raising the land up as well to have the water run towards the center. That is an issue as well, because with the trees that are there currently on our land, 100-odd-year-old trees, they're starting to die because of the amount of water that's sitting there. Because of the people that bought that, they destroyed every tree that was on that lot, had big vehicles run through, and they put craters that all the water now runs down towards our properties, and those trees are slowly starting to die. If they raise that a couple of feet, then that water is just going to turn into a swamp in that area behind our houses. We have no real protection from those houses at all. We're going to be looking straight at those houses. The S bend that comes off, great that they're now going to have like a 4-way intersection. Trouble is that S bend that's directly south of that is a real problem. My neighbour at the very edge of 900 every day has a car come into his yard. Every day. They've put up signs, big flashing arrows saying, make sure you take the turn. Guess what? There's always one idiot every day that doesn't seem to know how to use a steering wheel. Every day. This is not going to help that. This is going to make this worse. We have 80 townhouses being built. Not one's been built yet. That road is a bloody nightmare. Getting on 900 is a nightmare. The Costco has made it a real mess. No road work has been done. It's been proposed now for the last couple of years. Hopefully get done at the end of this year. Yet we're still going to have 80 townhouses built in the meantime. Now we're talking about another 55 houses to the north of us. Sorry, I don't know what people are talking about here where our valuations aren't going to drop. Okay, you put 80 townhouses behind us, you're putting 55 shanty houses in front of us, and our property prices aren't going to drop. I'm sorry, I cannot accept that. So, yeah, I do not agree with this at all. I like the idea, certainly. I don't understand why we've got to go to 55. I think that if we're going to do it, it has to be less than 55. We're just trying to push money. It's all about the dollar. Don't worry about once the people are in there, because, getting in and out of your house, who cares? You already live here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come and speak on this agenda item? Okay, having no one step forward, the public comment on this is closed, and we now have opportunity for rebuttal.
We want to thank our neighbors for coming out and discussing the project. As I've mentioned, we've had 2 neighborhood meetings. I recognize some of them here tonight. And so these are concerns and questions that we've been working through. Sounds like really this comes down to 2 different categories of concerns: the fire safety with the entrance, and then R4 zoning. So our proposed boulevard entrance at 70 foot wide, as I've mentioned, it is larger than the minimum 60 foot wide right-of-way entrance. Greg, I believe you asked if there was an option for an emergency access. There's not room north of the pond, but we have proposed an internal trail system. And if you could bring that up on the concept plan, maybe That'll give you a good visual of what I'm talking about. But if
Talking
you,
about this?
yes, there we go. So where the butterfly garden is south of lots 1 to 5, you see that there is a trail that kind of comes off of that perimeter trail. We would propose that that could be 12 foot wide to offer an emergency access location. But I would like to say that we are at the zoning stage of the process right now. We're focusing on proposed land use. And so a detail like fire safety access, the exact location, that's something that could be worked out at the time of primary plat. And so if the idea of an emergency access is something that the Plan Commission is comfortable with, that's something that could be discussed in detail at the time of primary plat.
So let me jump in here. Would you be agreeable to a commitment to implement that? So yes, we're talking about zoning, but it's time for commitments. And that's what, I'd be looking for, is to have a commitment to have that access, not only 12 foot wide, but built to carry a vehicle. So 12 foot wide and whatever deep to be able to sustain having a fire truck or something on that for what looks like a considerable distance.
Without me being part of the fire department or public works, I don't want to speak to the safety of having a full access so close to an existing Eden Gate access and our proposed full access. So I guess I would defer to staff on what their thoughts are.
Well, I'll bring that up when we have discussions. I may want to ask you to come up again at that time.
Sure. But I certainly understand where you're coming from, that we are at the stage for commitments. And so we would be open to that conversation. And then the other item that I think everyone wants to discuss is the proposed R4 zoning. And why does it have to be R4? We hit on this a little bit, but this is empty nester targeted. So these are buyers that are looking for smaller, low maintenance lots. Based off of the minimum lot width of other zoning districts. Let's see if this will work for me. We have to go with the lowest common denominator of the development standards that we are proposing, which is the lot width of 55.3 feet. That puts us in the R4 category. And we understand wanting to keep quality high and make sure that whatever development comes into this neighborhood is exactly what we're proposing. We want to make sure that, if God forbid something happens, this doesn't work out, that someone else can't come in and build apartments. That's why we're proposing only single-family detached uses. That's why we're proposing a minimum lot size of 6,600 square feet. That doesn't work for townhomes, that doesn't work for apartments. Same with the minimum 53-foot wide lots, which is far larger than the R4 minimum lot width. We're capping the number of lots at 55. Again, that number isn't going to work for townhomes or apartments. We are putting as many guardrails up as possible to make sure that this development can truly only be what we're proposing Briarwood as tonight. The added properties that we've gotten under contract, that has not come at an insignificant cost. It's added over $1 million of investment to this project. We cannot spread $20,000 of extra cost to 49 lots. Average buyer is not going to see $20,000 worth of value to their home just because the entrance aligns with an entrance across the street. So that's why we're proposing an additional 6 lots, 55. The product's the same. The building materials finishes are the same. The number of lots on the south side has remained the same. The only change to the concept plan has been the location of the access and the lots that are right along that access. And again, the density has remained largely the same thanks to the added acreage that we've acquired through all of this. We know staff wants the access to be as safe as possible. We agree. That's why we went out and had conversations with those 2 additional property owners, and why we've agreed to, frankly, pay a above market value for those homes. So we could make that entrance as safe as possible.
Thank you very much. Discussion.
So we're talking a lot about this boulevard entrance, but we have houses along a boulevard entrance. Does that negate the boulevardness of that entrance? Because you could have cars parked along that street in front of the houses and things like that. Does that lose some of that openness and width that you're taking advantage of?
That's a good question. I would want there to be signs that says this, like enforced signage that says no parking on the boulevard, at least on the boulevard entrance.
Yeah, that'd be tricky. So when we come to primary plat or whatever, we would have to get some commitments there and about
Yeah, that'd be
parking on
down
the
the
street.
road,
Oh,
right?
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. That is a concern. You lose that advantage. The other thing we've kind of talked about is this is targeted for empty nesters, but there's no commitment to that. There's 3 and 4 bedroom homes here on tiny lots. That seems like a good family house to me as well. And it's not just an empty nester. Now, granted, you can't have basketball goals or trampolines, but I didn't have one of those when I was raising kids either. So I don't know if the recommendation matches the product here.
Well, empty nesters, I can tell you, I have family that come and visit. They often have grandkids that come and visit. I have a lot of friends that they don't just have a 1 or 2 bedroom home. They have 3 and 4 bedroom homes. I mean, that makes sense to me just because people no longer live just down the block from grandma or their cousins or whatever. When they come to visit, they come to visit and often stay. So that to me doesn't, I think the small lot size and I don't want to cut grass any more than I have to is, this makes sense in terms of who it's being targeted to. Most people I know with kids want a yard where they can shove the kids outside and to get them to burn off some energy.
But I think it's a good point. And I don't disagree with the point that Andrew made because it could be the size of a home for a small family.
One child.
Or one child or two children. So it is without a restriction. I mean, it's the empty nester would be the intent and maybe the way it'd be marketed, but without any restrictions. It's going to be sold to the buyer that's going to come in.
And then
Because the
Mr.
price
Taylor
point is going to be
can
something
give
that,
us some more guidance on that. I mean, you have to have a special designation in order to restrict age.
Yeah, well, I mean, taking what you say to its logical conclusion, then you would want smaller lots, smaller homes, and more lots. So, I mean, you could make the houses smaller so you don't run into this problem. You could do that, and probably the builder would like that. But I don't think that's what you want to do. Is it?
no, I'm saying that, like Andrew, it's like there is no restriction on who can buy that house.
Correct. It's targeted to a certain market, which is all it can be.
Right. So.
But what I'm saying is though, but if some of the house models you think would lend itself to people with 2 or 3 children living there, then the answer is to make the houses smaller and probably to make the lot smaller. And I'm not sure that's consistent with what.
Which means more lots.
Right. I'm not sure you're accomplishing what you want to accomplish. And you can't restrict it.
I think you're taking my comments out of context. I'm agreeing with what Andrew said.
No, I know.
As far as that a buyer is going to come in that's looking at a price point and it may meet what they need. It's not necessarily, when I think of empty nesters, I'm thinking of like me, a little older, no kids, and I don't want to do yard maintenance. But there may be people looking for a house. So that's all I was making a point on, is that I agree that anybody could go in there, not
Yeah.
necessarily just empty nesters.
Somebody comes into the market looking for a house of this size and MLS pulls up this house and it's like, this is just what I want. It's close to center, it's close to town, everything's right nearby. Let's go. And I don't want to, what I don't want is people taking credit for targeted marketing is going to actually restrict the people that are there. I mean, I think this is.
That's what marketing is.
Well, we're assuming this is going to be a 3 to 4 bedroom house on 6,000 square feet. I mean, don't make an assumption that it's only going to be empty nesters. So
But that's not what our job is.
well, but what I'm saying is you need to consider traffic, you need to consider cars, you need to consider all the associated that comes along with that in a 3 to 4 bedroom house. So this is a small community or a one entrance community with very tight lots, room for 2 cars. And the question would be is there parking, or I guess another question could be, is the driveway long enough to house cars? You know, these kinds of questions come up when I guess that's a primary plat discussion, or is that a discussion or commitment we would have here?
I think that's a primary plat discussion, and we can't restrict, apartments. I lived in an apartment. I lived in more than one apartment. We have an idea of who lives in apartments, but I know people who had 3 and 4 children who also grew up and lived in apartments.
Yep.
That's not what apartments are ideal for, but that is what happens. And it's not our job to police who buys into a particular neighborhood. That is up to the project designer to market it to a particular demographic. And that is probably going to attract that demographic, but it doesn't mean you're not going to bring others in. And it's not that's not what we should be considering.
So I think going back to what's being requested is a commitment to build single-family homes on property asking to be rezoned R4. So whoever buys it, that's immaterial. It's like we're looking to,
Right.
what is it as far as should this be R4 from ag is the request for the action. I do have a question for Linda on the boulevard. Is that, since there's not a waiver in this, do we consider boulevards now 2 entrances? I'm trying to understand how that meets the ordinance now. It doesn't require
What they propose to you would need a waiver, even if they do the boulevard.
Okay.
As far as our ordinance goes. That waiver needs to be requested at the time of platting.
Okay.
All you're considering today is the zoning.
Thanks.
But because the entrance was such a discussion in our recommendation of denial at the previous location, we wanted to explain to you what the changes were and then what their additional changes were with the entrance shape.
Thank you.
That answers my question. Thank you.
To answer your other question, Andrew, the required building setback for these would be 20 feet. So that's how much driveway space there would be.
Further discussion? If not, we can entertain a motion.
I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for ZA 24-13 Briarwood, the zoning map amendment to rezone 18.23 acres from ag and Avon to AGR for Hendricks County to R4, subject to the commitments proposed by the petitioner and also the restricted permitted uses we've discussed this evening, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a zoning map amendment under state law.
Do we have a second? Is there a second on the motion? Would someone like to make a different motion?
I'll second it.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Rockerbrand,
I'll go 4.
Zuzen,
Against.
Ransberg,
4.
Guggenberger,
Against.
Kaufman,
4.
Reed.
4.
Petition carries. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. We are now into new business. And looks like this one is in 2 parts.
Okay, the next petition we're discussing is a preliminary plat located at the southeast corner of 900 and US 36. It's 27.6 acres, zone C2, and it's located within tiers 1 and 2 of the US overlay. There's significant history on this site, but I'm only bringing up the ones that have happened this year, essentially. But I will touch on the other ones further down. But this year, Ray Skillman Automotive has received from the Board of Zoning Appeals a special exception to have an automobile dealership on this site and a variance to have to allow for a greater maximum setback than what's permitted in Tier 1 and to have 6 rows of parking in front of the building when only 2 rows are permitted. And then today, the petitioner is requesting the plat approval for 2 lots and 2 blocks, as well as a waiver to allow for reduced separation of the curb cuts for individual driveways on County Road 900. This is the subject site here. It's a large piece of property in the southeast corner. Currently vacant. This whole area is vacant. And then this is the Ray Skillman Collision Center here. 900 is here. This is the zoning of the property. It's not really showing up here, but the majority of all this is C2. There's an I2 down here. This is C3 over here, but pretty much surrounded by commercial and industrial property. The plat is shown in 2 different pages here, but this would be the northernmost part of the plat. So the immediate southeast corner at the intersection would be the new Ray Skillman dealership, which is this building here, surrounding by all of the parking and display area. 900 is here, 36 is here. So this would be lot 1. Then this would be block A over here, and that would be available for development under C2, but no development proposed at this time. And this is the southern part of it. So the Ray Skillman Collision Center is this piece here. And then block B is here, holding the existing retention pond. And then this parcel up here would be available for development. This area across here would be Kingston Street, and Kingston Street extended to this property. There is a waiver request, and we've spent significant amount of time with staff, the Department of Public Works, and the petitioner, as well as NDOT on the traffic study that was done for this development and the proposal, or the ultimate proposal you have in front of you here. I just want to touch on some things. So US 36 is up here. There were 3 driveway curb cuts that are still currently there. They don't access anything, but the concrete is still there adjacent to US 36. With the upcoming development plan, they propose to be removed, and that's what this sign right, or this note right here, these arrows show that they're going to be removed. There is an existing drive into this property. Let me show you this drive right here is right here. So initially they showed 2 drives into this property, both lining, so getting rid of this one in every instance, and then one here lining up with Andy Moore across the street, and then one here also aligning with Andy Moore across the street. In order to do that alignment, they would need waivers from the distance separation between the drive here and the intersection at 36, and then they would need a waiver for the distance separation from this, where that would line up here to Kingston Street. DPW did not like that alternative because of people pulling into or south on 900 from 36 would start backing up in this location if people were waiting to turn in either way, and that it was more critical to keep the separation away from the intersections of the roads as opposed to the intersection of driveways. So the driveway was moved to the central location here, which our Department of Public Works pretty much had the idea for it at that location. But at that location, although safer from the two intersections, it doesn't meet the separation from the Andy Moore Drive here and here. So the request is for approval of the plat and reduction in the separation from these two drives. And then the one here on Kingston Street would not align exactly with the Ray Skillman Collision Center across Kingston, but it was more important to keep the distance separation from this intersection. So while not absolutely ideal, the site is constrained by not having access allowed on US 36 by the state, Andy Moore having two driveways, which we dug into some records and do not know how two access drives got where they are, and trying to provide the best location for an access drive for this property to develop. And without a waiver, essentially, it cannot develop. So that's kind of what waivers are designed for and are incorporated into ordinances for situations like this where a design solution is not possible. So we are recommending approval of the plat, and we are also recommending approval of the waiver.
Question. This was approved once before, correct?
The plat that you're looking at today, there was a previous plat that was never recorded. I don't remember if the lot lines exactly line up. And then there was also a development plan approved that has since expired.
Because my question was going to be, what's changed from that approval to this today?
I would have to go and double check. I mean, the plat was never recorded, so it has expired, but I don't recall from 2008 where the entrance was. I believe it lined up, but I'm not positive.
I mean, there's really no reason, this is more of an oddball type thing. There's no reason for the one entrance to line up with Andy Moore, other than if you just want to go from car lot to car lot to car lot to car lot. And they can just turn left, go down to Kingston and come in the back ways and go car lot to car lot.
I have a question about, on the diagram on the bottom, you said those two entrances don't line up.
Mm-hmm.
And you said because you needed to stay farther from the intersection. Why?
These two driveways don't line up.
Right.
And so in order to get this one as far away as possible from this intersection, this offset is created.
So that means that they're not compliant with today's standards, but for the other.
Correct. Correct.
And it would be considered safer for them to be misaligned, but
According to our Department of Public Works Director, he would prefer the separation from the interchange be in place rather than the lining up of the drives. They are a very low traffic generator, both uses, north and south, and so he's not concerned. And Kingston's a very low speed limit.
okay, it's just like we've had so many where they talk about them lining up and this is the opposite.
But what I was hoping is you could take Kingston Street all the way across to the eastern boundary to tie into those.
And I neglected to say that it does. So this is a dedication of road. So Kingston Street will
Better
go.
picture than this.
So this will
Go to the,
This will go all the way to this property line.
and tie in, but there's a building there, right? So
There is a building there, yes.
Okay. Then my other question is that a private road then back there until you get up to,
Avon Village Parkway, I believe, is public here to this point, and then is private.
but at least you'd have the access for Kingston to go that far at
Correct.
some future
For
time.
future time, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? If there are no further questions, the petitioner can come forward.
Good evening. Derek Snyder with Crossroad Engineers, 115 North 17th Avenue, Beech Grove, Indiana. I'm here tonight on behalf of Ray Skillman Realty to request approval of the primary plat for the Ray Skillman Automotive of Avon, as well as the waiver request discussed by Linda. I'm joined tonight by Justin Bunty with Ray Skillman. Linda did a great job of really covering a lot of the background information, so I'll go through these first few slides quickly and then try to answer some of the questions that members of the commission had. So the property is located along US 36 on the south side. More specifically, as indicated in the staff report, it's at the southeast corner of US 36 and County Road 900 East. The yellow line is the entire property in question that would be platted with this subdivision. As Linda had indicated, the property is zoned both C2 and I2. The portion of I2 is located south of Kingston, and that is the existing Ray Skillman Collision Center, which will remain through this development. The adjacent land uses, as you're probably well aware, there are 6 existing car dealerships immediately to the west of the proposed site. The southern portion is industrial. North of US 36 is obviously commercial retail. And then the proposed conditions, just to touch on a couple points that or questions that were asked by the commission. So the Kingston Street extension, as part of the primary plat, when we get to that point, the secondary plat, the right-of-way would be dedicated for the Kingston Street extension, but the intent would not be for that to be constructed at this time. Because Block A and Block B, the future development, the drive cuts, et cetera, there are no plans currently in the works for those to be developed. So we don't want to construct a street and then have to move entrances or cut them in after the fact. But the intent would be that that right-of-way would be dedicated all the way to the property line for the future expansion and extension of Kingston Street. There was a question with regards to what the previously approved plan consisted of. Linda is correct that the previously approved final plat was never recorded. The project kind of fell through, so to speak. Ray Skillman Automotive was actually able to purchase a piece of property further west. The previous approval included 2 dealerships. There would have been a dealership on Lot 1 and a second dealership on what was at the time Lot 2 back in 2015. Following that plan approval, they purchased a piece of property further to the west that actually allowed them to build another dealership. And this property just kind of went to the back of the line, so to speak. With that said, the previous approval did include 2 drive cuts on County Road 900 East, one that would line up with the north drive on Annie Moore and one that would line up with the south drive to Annie Moore, both on the west side of 900. As Linda had indicated, Department of Public Works had expressed a strong desire to shift the entrance so that the 300-foot separation is maintained from US 36 and from Kingston. In order to do that, we had to eliminate a drive, so we dropped it down to a single drive off of 900 East. As a result, the separation from the existing drives on the west side of Andy Moore could not be maintained. Our understanding in conversations with DPW staff is that this is the preferred route, and we would actually agree that this is a safer option for the full access. As part of that full access, we would be providing a two-way left turn for the northbound Andy Moore Drive and a two-way left turn for the entrance to Lot 1 of the commercial subdivision, which would be the Mazda dealership. As Linda had indicated, let me back up one slide here. So Lot 1 would contain the Mazda dealership. Block A would be platted but undeveloped for future development. Lot 2 is the existing existing collision center, and Block B would be future commercial development, and the southern portion would be the enlarged detention pond with a common area for stormwater detention for the entire subdivision. This slide provides a little bit more information regarding the separation distances. As you can see, north is to the right, so we have US 36 on the right-hand side and Kingston on the left-hand side. The separations at the bottom of that exhibit are from Kingston Street and US 36. As you can see, we've maintained the 300-foot separation. The existing drives onto Andy Moore on the west side here on the top of this exhibit. As you can see, the separation distance between those two drives is only 338 feet. So there would not be any scenario where we could meet separation from what is essentially 4 different access points at 300-foot separation requirements. So we've opted to follow staff's recommendation and provide the separation from the public roads and provide a two-way left turn lane. And then with that, just a quick overlay of the conceptual layout with the existing surrounding area. As you can see, the 5 of the 6 dealerships that I mentioned before to the west, and then the proposed concept overlaid on top of the existing. The remaining property would be platted as part of the subdivision and could be developed in the future. So I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Is the proposed detention pond size to account for, if that does become dealership, it would be able to retain all the water from that entire site?
Correct. Yeah. So it would actually detain, I actually want to back up a little bit. So the collision center currently does not drain into that detention pond. At the time, so there's an existing pond located on site now.
Yes.
Which you can see. Oh, I'm sorry. Point the flasher right at you. There's an existing pond located in the southeast corner. So that pond was actually constructed when I believe this was called Avon Point, when this was originally partially developed in 2012. So all of that was done and the collision center was already in place. So collision center does not drain into that pond currently. We would maintain those existing conditions, but the pond would be sized to detain any runoff from the Mazda dealership on Lot 1, any future development on Block A north of Kingston, and anything south of Kingston on that currently undeveloped piece.
How do you know that that retention pond is going to be big enough when you don't know what's going to go there?
Anytime you're doing master planning, you always make some assumptions based on land use and allowable impervious area. So when we did this in 2015, The assumption was that this would be almost entirely impervious because it's a car dealership. We would maintain a similar assumption in that you're going to have a curve number that is consistent with car dealerships, which are, a high percentage of impervious surface area.
So it's already zoned C2, so we're not changing the zoning, because my concern was, you don't know it's going to go in Block A or Block B, but if we're changing the zoning to what, well, I don't know, you don't know. I don't like to do that, but if it's already zoned C2, we're not asking for a zoning change, correct?
Correct.
All right.
It's just a plat approval.
Dodge that bullet.
I did find the 2015 approval, and there were 2 curb cuts on 900 and 2 curb cuts on 36.
Well, there's another question. So then, because of your conversations with NDOT, and there are, it looks like 3 existing curb cuts there now on 36?
Correct. So
Vacate those?
the 3 furthest west cuts, so we have a cut here, here, and here, would be removed.
They are in the 36 right away, so there's no vacation needed. They're going to pull up the pavement. With the
Okay, so they don't have to vacate it right
Correct.
now? Okay. That was,
Thank you. I didn't catch that part about the vacation.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody signed up to speak for or against this agenda item?
Just the 2 gentlemen here, the petitioners.
Okay.
can you go
Would you
back-
like to rebut anything you just said? Okay.
Can you go back to Kingston and 36? With our proposed improvements at Angelina Way, how does that, you have a left turn lane now. I think you have a straight through now and you have a right turn lane now? So none of that's going to. Yes. Well, from the south going north to 36, you got a left, a straight, and a right. That's not going to change, is it? Or, I mean, we're not going to add 2 left turn lanes or 2 right turn lanes?
No additional lanes are proposed.
Discussion. And Mr. Taylor, just as a reminder, we hear the waiver first and then the plat. Okay. Right, okay, just wanted to make sure I was timing it correctly.
So I think the design with the current or the proposed entrance that needs a waiver, I think is the right design. We should be going to is the right design. It'd be nice if you could say to the west, redo your design to be right, but I know that's not something we have power to do. So I don't know why there would be any much discussion needed on that waiver. It's the right design. There's some risk for the property to the west, but I think with the center turn lane, that helps reduce some of that risk too.
I agree. I'm not sure why the Andy Moore was not designed the same way, but
What about just a discussion on then we also want a waiver on the one on Kingston, right? Even though it's not in here, I don't think.
well, they're not planning on pushing Kingston east until that property is developed.
True. But when it is, wouldn't we want that aligned or not?
Well, that's a good point. It's not in the waiver. That it's only the cut on 900 that's on the waiver.
Right.
Right. Didn't you say there was?
So the waiver that was in the staff report and advertised is just a generic separation. Your recommended motion is what is not correct.
Oh, okay. So it's the separation at both 900 and Kingston.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And Department of Public Works didn't like the lineup for the Kingston one?
The Department of Public Works actually designed where these locations are, or suggested them.
For both of them?
Yes,
Do you know how far apart they are from being aligned?
I do not.
So what language needs to be added to the waiver motion?
It would just say County Road 900 and Kingston Street.
Okay. If there's no further discussion on the waiver, we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve MAP P25-01 Waiver A request to waive the Avon UDO 7.218 to allow for a full access curb cut onto County Road 900 East and Kingston Street without the required separation from an existing curb cut, since it has satisfied all the requirements for waivers under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
For your second?
I'll second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Zuzen,
4.
Guggenberger,
4.
Rockerbrand,
4.
Reed,
4.
Kaufman,
4.
Ransberg,
4. MAP 2501 passes and is granted, and we now move on to the approval of the major subdivision plat. MAP 2501, well, this is the plat, the previous one was a waiver. Any further discussion on that? This makes sense to me that as in terms of what, it's a natural, I can't imagine anything else would be built there except a car dealership.
Yeah, I think staff did a good job in presenting this. We've been looking for this probably to come out here for years. So I appreciate some of the background because I wondered why we never saw this before.
Yep.
So I think staff did a good job of presenting this and agree with what they've put in their staff report as far as it satisfying the criterion.
So I have questions though on what's the difference between a block and a lot? Because this is breaking it into two lots and 2 blocks.
So a block is, essentially, it's still creating 4 parcels, 4 taxable parcels. But a lot is in terms of platting, it's meant to be the final representation of that lot.
Gotcha.
A block, we don't know what's going to happen to it. It could be subdivided further in the future. And we don't want to set it in stone yet, so we call it a block.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any further discussion? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve MAP P25-01 Ray Skillman Automotive of Avon preliminary plat, a request to divide 27.6 acres into 2 lots and 2 blocks, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a major subdivision plat under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Here's a second.
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll take a vote.
Reed,
4.
Kaufman,
4.
Ransberg,
4.
Guggenberger,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Rockerbrand,
4.
Motion carries. MAP 2501 waiver and preliminary plat are both approved. Okay, last item on the agenda. DPR 2503 Harvest Landing Lot 2.
Thank you again, President Ransberg, members of the commission. This is a development plan review for Harvest Landing Lot 2. Just northwest of County Road 900 East and US 36, more specifically the northwest corner of County Road 900 East and Charles Nelson Drive. Address is 8944 Dr. Charles Nelson Drive. It's about 8.25 acres. It is zone C2. You can see it highlighted on the map here. You can see Costco to the west, other outlots for Harvest Landing with commercial retail uses to the south. To the north, you have the R4, which is the Village Place townhomes under construction. And then you have some older single-family residential across 900 to the east. This property was rezoned from R1 to C2 back in 2020, and it was also annexed around the same time with the annexation being completed in 2021. It was platted as part of Harvest Landing with final plat approval occurring in 2021. There was a variance granted in 2023 to allow trash enclosures in front of the building along County Road 900 East, where those typically have to be located behind the front building line. A variance approval that is not acted on with a building permit within 1 year of approval expires, although the UDO allows for the administrator to allow for an extension, which the administrator has granted. So that variance approval is still in effect. Around the same time, this site also went to the commission here for development plan review approval, which was granted in November of 2023. Again, similar scenario that the approval expires after 12 months. However, the administrator doesn't have the authority to grant an extension for a development plan review. So with that being expired, you have this request today seeking DPR approval to provide for 2 commercial retail buildings with surface parking and related infrastructure improvements. There are also 3 waivers requested, one of development standards related to the buffer yard to the north of abutting Village Place townhomes, and 2 waivers of design standards related to architecture. Specifically, waiver A is to allow off-street parking spaces to encroach 3 feet into the required 30-foot north buffer yard where such encroachments are not permitted. Waiver B is a waiver of design standards to allow for the use of fiber cement siding on the facades of the proposed buildings, which that is not listed as an approved exterior finish material. And waiver C is a waiver of design standards to allow portions of the north facade of proposed building 1 to be constructed without the required facade articulation. Oopsie. That's again just to look at the site. Here's the plat. Again, this is lot 2 here. Again, Costco to the west, 900 east, abutting to the east, and another Village Place, Harvest Landing outlots here to the south, Village Place townhomes to the north. So this is the site plan. So this is proposed building 1 that I mentioned with the lack of facade articulation in the rear. That's waiver C. This is proposed to be an Ace Hardware. If I understand and remember correctly, when this came through in 2023, Ace it is Ace, correct? Thank you. Ace was going to take up about half of the building now, and then there were going to be a couple tenant spaces. Now, I believe Ace is proposed to take up the entire building. And then you have proposed building 2 here, which would be a multi-tenant retail building. That's just a little bit closer view of that site plan. This is the landscape plan. While we're looking at this, just a couple issues to point out, which are in staff's requested conditions. There's 2 specific things related to landscaping that we need revised. One is that there are places around the perimeter of the building where foundation plantings aren't shown, specifically here, and then a couple spots on building 2. We made the petitioner aware of those. They indicated that they'd be agreeable to submitting a revised landscape plan that will incorporate meeting that requirement. The other item is just that, and you can't see this on the plan because it's in the planting schedule, but this row of evergreen trees, which is used in part to screen the property as the UDO requires from the residential development under construction to the north, those need to be 8 feet tall at the time of planting. The landscape plan indicates 6 feet tall. So that's also in our requested conditions. Here's just a look at the architecture. So this is building 1, which would be Ace Hardware. This is the east facade that would face 900 East. This is the west facade facing towards Costco. This would be an area where I believe they have outdoor display of some probably seasonal items out here. So then this is the south facade, which functionally would act as the front facing the parking lot. This is actually the west half of it, because it's kind of a long building. It's broken into two on the plans. So this is the west half of the south facade, and this is the east half of the south facade. So where the fiber cement siding, which is the subject of waiver B, that would be in these areas, accentuating, if you will, the entrances here. So those would be the areas where you would have fiber cement siding. The remainder of that would be brick. And again, the east and west facades, this would be your fiber cement lap siding there and here, and the remainder would be brick. And then this would, there we go. This would be the north facade for Ace Hardware. And I should also point out these articulation points around the entrances, this is where the buildings meet the articulation standard in the architectural standards. So this is the west half of the north facade, or what you might think of as the rear. And this is the part that doesn't have articulation because it's kind of back of house. It's not to say that it would be impossible to do it, but if you're not going to do it, that would probably be the best place, where you would not expect to see as much fenestration or articulation.
Is there berming and stuff around that too to block it from the view from that angle?
I don't think they proposed a berm on the landscape plan, but the 8-foot evergreen plantings would meet the buffer yard requirement of the UDO. So this is building 2. This one's oriented perpendicular, if you will, to building 1. So you have the north and south facades, which are the shorter ends. And then this is the west facade, which would be the functional front facing towards the parking lot. This is the north half of it. This is the south half of it. And then this would be the east facade facing County Road 900. And it actually, although these would be like service entrances, because this would be the functional back of the building, because it fronts 900, it still has the architectural standards applied for a front facade. And so they have provided the articulation and, more importantly, the amount of windows or glazing, as it's called in the ordinance, to meet that standard. So this will, from 900, essentially look similar to the front of a building rather than the back of the building. So with waiver B to use fiber cement siding, which is not listed as an approved material in the architectural standards, this is what the petitioner submitted as an example. The top left here, this is a lap siding, fiber cement lap siding product. But they submitted this picture to show the color that they propose for it. And their intent is to make it complementary to the designs on Harvest Landing lots 4 and 7, which you can see in the photos I've added here. This material is actually a wood cladding. It's not so much of a lap siding, it's an interlocking wood cladding. But their intent is to kind of complement that with a similar color, except it would be lap siding. So addressing the waivers, I might not talk in detail about every finding unless you have questions, but for the waiver of development standards, waiver A, to encroach 3 feet into the 30-foot north buffer yard, we would point out this is a very minor deviation of a 10% encroachment, not even for the full length of the buffer yard. I mean, it might be helpful, I guess, if I point that out on the site plan here. So what we're talking about is, this is the property line from Village Place Townhomes. This dashed line here, if I can keep my hand steady enough, that's the 30-foot buffer yard setback. This area of parking here, it's hard to even see, but it encroaches 3 feet across that line. So we look at it as a minor deviation from the ordinance. It was also approved with the previous DPR approval that expired in 2023. We think it would still function and appear to meet the intent of the standard to provide adequate buffering from the residential property to the north. So for those reasons, we are recommending approval of that waiver. Waiver B is the waiver of design standards to allow the use of fiber cement siding, which is not listed as an approved exterior finish material for commercial development, either in just the regular standards or in the US 36 overlay standards. We do believe it would be complementary, though, to what was approved for lots 4 and 7, where they used a wood cladding, which is also not listed as a permitted commercial exterior finish. Also, we would point out that being adjacent to Village Place, we believe what they're trying to do here with the architectures, to go back to this, it is a little bit more of a hybrid between a commercial design and a residential design with the gables and with the lap siding. So it's, from an architectural style standpoint, it will be a little more of a transition between the residential immediately to the north and then the commercial to the south, which is more just surrounded by other commercial. So we do believe that it will fit in, not contradict the intent of the subdivision regulations. Again, a similar design was approved in 2023, so I think that's worth taking into consideration. And then finally, waiver C, which is to allow the portion of the north facade, or what's effectively the rear facade for building 1 or Ace Hardware, to not have the required articulation on part of the building. Again, this is similar to what was approved in 2023. It's a minor deviation. It won't be obvious or seen really from public view from a street or anything. It will be screened from the abutting residential development by the landscaping that's required. We think it is compatible generally with the surroundings and the intent of the regulations. And as I mentioned, it was pretty much similar to what was approved in 2023. So we think overall the proposed buildings would be complementary to the existing architecture in Harvest Landing, as well as considerate of and blending in somewhat with the residential development to the north. So for all those reasons, we are recommending approval of all 3 waivers. And then just moving on to the development plan review itself, we find that the plan does appear to meet all of the standards of the UDO, except for the items I mentioned, which are in our requested conditions 2 and 3, and those are specifically adding foundation plantings where required around some portions of the building, revising the note on the landscape plan that the evergreen trees planted along the north line need to be 8 feet tall at time of planting instead of 6 feet tall. And then I didn't mention, but bicycle racks, which are required by the UDO, they did show those on the plan initially, but they needed to move them to be closer to the front entrances to the buildings because they're required to be as close to the building as possible, or as close as the nearest non-ADA reserved parking spaces. And they had them a little too close together. The UDO requires them to be spaced out to provide adequate space to get everybody in there with their bikes and get access to their bikes. So they just need to revise the site plan to show the appropriate spacing and location of those bicycle racks. The petitioner has indicated that they're agreeable to doing those things and having those as conditions. So we are recommending approval. If you approve the waivers, then we recommend you approve the DPR subject to the conditions in the staff report, which are outlined here. 1, 3, and 5, or I'm sorry, 1, 4, and 5 are basically standard language, and 2 and 3 relate to the revised plans vis-a-vis the bicycle racks and the landscaping. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have when we approved this previously in 2023, did it have the fiber cement waiver?
It did.
It did, and we approved it. Okay. I'm not a big fan of, so you had the first building built, with the chicken salad place. And then when the second one came up for review, we said, well, we allowed it there, so we should allow it here. And eventually you just keep on doing that and keep on doing that. I don't, that's not a,
The waiver
something that-
becomes
something that I don't-
meaningless,
Right,
yeah.
it's something I
This
don't
is
really.
at least the
really
last
want.
undeveloped lot in Harvest Landing, so.
Well, and is
at
there,
least if we're looking at it from, the standpoint of what's in Harvest Landing and what's appropriate, it hopefully wouldn't necessarily need to carry out to
well, but I
have
mean,
an impact on another site that's not connected to Harvest Landing.
But it was also, it wasn't on the approved list or the not approved list, correct?
Correct.
That product?
Yeah, it's fair to point out, there's some ambiguity in how the UDO is written, in that it specifies certain materials that are supposed to be used as because every commercial building is required to have 2 exterior finished materials used. And then it specifies the materials that should be used. And then later, there's mention of certain other materials that are specifically listed as prohibited in neither wood cladding or fiber cement lap siding are listed as prohibited materials, but they're also not in the materials that are specified when it says these materials must be used. So it's kind of unclear.
So we
It kind of
probably-
falls in between, you could say.
yeah, I remember having this discussion with Bill before. And the question was, is the intent of the UDO to say we want something that looks like masonry? A lot of times the fiber cement stuff is intended to look like wood grain, or something like that. So it's a different look. So
Well, and that technology, I'm sure, continues as new products are being developed. We're going to find ourselves having this same conversation as there's going to be a new product that is introduced that is not going to be fiber cement. It's going to be made out of
Well, but
orange peels or something.
right, but what I'm talking about is the look. What's
Yeah.
the intent of the look? Do you want it to look like brick? Do you want it to look like concrete? Or do you
Yeah,
want it to look
I
like
think it's,
wood grain?
sorry, I think it's important to point out also that, so you have the architectural standards that apply to all commercial buildings in chapter 7, the subdivision regs of the UDO, but then you also have in chapter 2, under the US 36 overlay, you have an additional set of architectural standards, and they both apply. A lot of times the language is similar. But whereas if we were looking at something outside of 36 overlay, there's not a specific percentage of masonry requirement, but in the US 36 overlay, there is a masonry requirement. And it differs in the different tiers, but within tier 3, it requires a minimum 60% brick, stone, drive it, or stucco, at least on the elevations facing a public street, and then a minimum of 30% masonry on the remaining sides. And I believe the petitioner, they did some calculations on this at our request, and I believe that all of the sides meet that 60% requirement, which goes beyond what the US 36 overlay specifies for masonry, because it's only 60% on street facing sides and 30% on the others. So
So we're just talking about the product type. And the UDO basically doesn't say if it's approved, doesn't say if it isn't approved. So maybe that's one more thing we need to go back and revisit with the UDO.
rest assured, we have that on our list for.
So they've met the requirement for how much masonry they have.
Correct.
It's just an issue of now we've got this extra material
It's
that's
other stuff, yeah.
ambiguous. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
So I guess it's kind of safe to say it came in under a technicality then, basically. Just kind of, well, I mean, it came in once. Well, obviously, I guess I don't know, I'm begging the question here. Came in once, I figured, okay, we've done it once, we'll do it again.
Well,
Kind of.
Yeah, and I'm not privy to the discussions you guys had in 2023 when Bill was sitting here.
I remember those conversations, though. It was very circular.
I guess when they're talking about making it even a different material than on these other buildings, and then they're saying, well, to make the color complementary, I'm just kind of wondering why you can't use a for sure approved material and also make it color complementary. Why does it need to be a different material?
And that's probably a question for the petitioner to try to answer, if you still have that question.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, so typically, you said there's a minimum 60% masonry. What is typically the other 40%? Is it metal cladding? Is it, what other products are allowed? I've read the UDO recently, so.
So the 60%, Must have a minimum of 60% brick, stone, drive-it, or stucco, excluding windows and doors on the elevation facing a public street, and 30% excluding windows and doors on the remaining sides. Now that's specific to tier 3, which is what we're looking at today. There's other, so when you look at, and specifically right now I'm in 2.10.02C of the UDO. It says, when it says that 2 different materials are required, it says a minimum of 2 different exterior finish materials must be used for building exteriors, including stone, brick, architectural precast, architectural metal panels, glass, ornamental metal, and drive-it or stucco. And it goes on, and then it says the building must use these materials for all the exterior finish. That's where we get to saying, okay, you have these listed, and you say, you have to use these for all the finish, so how can you use something else? That's where we get into this gray area, but then we go on and say, there's certain materials that are specifically prohibited. But more specific to your question, those other items might be architectural precast, architectural metal panels, glass, ornamental metal. Those would be things that we would consider masonry that could be used.
Okay.
I had thought that they actually specifically said fiber cement wasn't allowed. That's my recollection.
So prohibited materials. Give me just a minute and I'll find that. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So in the US 36 overlay 2.10.02B, prohibited materials, concrete block, including split face block, prefabricated steel panels, and vinyl siding are prohibited as exterior finish materials within this overlay district. In tier 1 and 2, drive-it and stucco are prohibited except when used as accent materials covering the balance of the wall after the masonry is applied. Yeah, we didn't find any mention specifically to fiber cement.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, let's have the petitioner come forward.
Dylan Reynolds from Spaceco 3850 Priority Way South Drive, Suite 110, Indianapolis. Thanks for hanging around tonight. I have Brent Binge with Kenmar, the developer on the project as well. So I think Brent, I'll turn it to you first to.
Yeah. So Brent Binge, Kenmar. We're located downtown Indianapolis in Capitol Center. So I'm the owner of the project. I developed the project.
Need you to give an address.
I don't, 201 North Illinois Street is our address. So I just want to briefly address the conversation around the fiber cement siding. This is a product that we have done in many different areas. Particularly, I can think of a couple projects. One is Spring Mill Station in Westfield, Indiana. Actually has more fiber cement siding than this, but it's a beautiful product. It complements the brick facade that we're also doing, and it's a great transition to neighborhoods. As you go from a heavy industrial setting of or a commercial setting like Costco and everything along 36, as you get closer to the rooftops, you do want that transition. And this is a great product that does that. We also did it in another shopping center in Carmel called Brookshire Village, which is a beautiful subdivision surrounded by rooftops. And the community just loves it. So we could do a stucco. I think you mentioned we could do a stucco. You guys don't want stucco. I mean, stucco gets dirty over time, starts to stain. I'm telling you, this is a good product. It's a good transition. And so I just wanted to, and it's more expensive for us as well to do this as opposed to stucco. But I'm from Central Indiana. I live in Central Indiana. We got businesses that are going to be in this center. And so this is something that we drive by every day and we want to be proud of and good neighbors. And I think this does that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dylan and I can answer any questions later if you have them. Thank you.
Yeah, so with that, I won't belabor, what we're asking for. For all intents and purposes, this is the same project that came at the end of 2023. And now we're ready to move forward with it and just need your blessing again. So let me know if you have any other specific questions for me or our team.
I'm assuming there's nobody signed up to speak against this project?
They're not here anymore.
Yes, Ray Albee signed up for this one as well, but they weren't here earlier, so I
They've
assume they're
left,
not here.
okay. Okay. Any questions for the petitioner?
About the lap siding, I'll ask it. So what is the, how's the color added to the siding?
So the product that we're using is the same product that they put on.
Need you to give your name and address.
Jason Miller, Ovalis, 1346 Concordia Drive, Avon, Indiana, 46123. The product that we're using is the same product that they put on Starbucks. It's a specialty product that they apply to either the James Hardy board, or there's another product, I can't think off the top of my head, that they apply that material to, which is the same product that they use for the Nichiha, which is what was used on lots 4 and lot 7.
And did you ask the color?
Well, no, like the color, what I'm worried about is color fastness, because these do face south, facing 36. If sun bleach could be a big deal, and that wouldn't look good.
Yeah, so it
after just a
is
few
the
years.
exact same manufacturing process as the Nichiha uses for this. They
Okay.
just apply it to the James Hardy board, which is a Class A commercial product,
Yeah.
just as the Nichiha is.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion.
I think we're only looking at this because it expired, right?
I think so.
Staff has indicated, for the most part, all these waivers were approved back in 2023. And does that make it right? No, but when you look at the pictures of the product, this developer has done the whole development. It's nobody else. It's been himself. So we see today what he's given us, and I don't see why it would deviate anyway on these next 2 buildings.
I agree.
And staff lays it out and they recommend approval. So, as far as it meeting all the requirements, they do a good job of explaining that. And again, it was approved before, we had questions at that time, but we approved those waivers. I don't think anything has really changed here. Maybe some new additions to the commission, but it's pretty much what we've seen
If I
previously.
recall, it was a much, much, much lengthier conversation at that time. If there's no further discussion, then let's go ahead and start taking motions. We would start with waiver A, DPR 2503, Lot 2, waiver A. We'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve DPR 2503 waiver A is requested to waive Avon UDO 6.8D to allow for off-street parking spaces encroaching 3 feet into the required 30-foot north buffer yard, since it has satisfied all the requirements for waivers under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
I'll second.
Having heard a motion in a second, we'll take a vote.
Ransberg,
For,
Guggenberger,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Rockabran,
4.
Reed,
4.
Kaufman,
4.
motion carries. Waiver A for DPR 2503 is passed, is approved. Moving on to waiver B for DPR 2503. Do I entertain a motion?
I move that we approve DPR 25-03 waiver B, a request to waive Avon UDO 7.10D7 and UDO 2.1002C to allow for the use of fiber cement lap siding, which is not listed as an approved exterior finish material since it has satisfied all the requirements for waivers under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Having heard a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll take a vote.
Kaufman,
4.
Ransberg,
For,
Guggenberger,
4.
Zuzen,
4.
Rockabran,
4.
Reed,
4.
motion carries, and waiver B for DPR 2503 Harvest Landing Lot 2 is approved. Moving on to waiver C. Do we want to entertain a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve DPR 2503 waiver C, a request to waive Avon UDO 7.10D2 to allow portions of the north facade of the proposed building 1 to be constructed without the required articulation, since it has satisfied all the requirements for the waivers under the state law and subject to the approved findings of fact.
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Reed.
4.
Kaufman.
4.
Ransberg.
4.
Guckenberger.
4.
Zuzen.
4.
Rockabrand.
4.
Motion carries and waiver C for DPR 2503 is approved. Now moving on to the development plan review and request for approval.
I move that we approve DPR 25-03 Harvest Landing Lot 2, a development plan review to allow for construction of 2 commercial retail buildings with off-street parking and related infrastructure, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a development plan review under state law and subject to the approved findings of fact, including offered amendments this evening.
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll now take a vote.
Ransberg.
4.
Guckenberger.
4.
Zuzen.
4.
Rockabrand.
4.
Reed.
4.
Kaufman.
4.
Motion carries and DPR 2503 is approved for forwarding to the town council.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to other business. Is there anything else that we need to hear before we move on to committee reports?
I'd like to bring up one thing. And I guess I'd like to ask Dan's help on this of how to conduct ourselves during breaks. Could you just give us a refresher on that, Dan?
Yeah, we don't want to talk to the audience on our breaks. It can only get us in trouble. And so if they want to talk about a case that is on your docket or you just heard or you might hear later, then I just try to stay away from that. Or if they want to talk about something that's going to be on next month, that sort of thing, I just use your judgment. It's okay to talk to them, but we want to stay away from that. And also should never explain why you voted some way or didn't. I'd be careful about that. And I appreciate you asking.
Okay. Committee reports. I know the BZA did not have a meeting this month.
Redevelopment invoice approvals. In addition, Greg Garitas was in to discuss the 2024 annual reports and also put a recommendation in for the selection of the construction engineer for Dan Jones Phase 3.
Okay. Any other reports from anybody? If not, then this meeting is adjourned.